At a certain point, strange things started happening again around the world, especially in New York, Manhattan, and the United States. While waiting for the end to begin, all the outside players received system notifications that said the demotion prevention had begun. Immediately after, another system alert appeared, announcing that the behemoth monster of the apocalypse was being called up. This resulted in a spatial rift in the sky from which the monster had already extended its claws. Seeing that danger was already approaching, one of the players who also took part in this battle spoke out in fear, amidst loud shouting and panicking people. Subsequently, a monster emerged from the portal, resulting in the following system notification: defeat the behemoth before it destroys the world. As soon as the monster began to advance, one of the fighters, clutching his sword, nervously shouted to his comrades, "Take your positions in case we suddenly fail here." Looking at the giant who threatened them and whom they had to defeat somehow, the group leader added, "Otherwise, the world would end." The BattleNet began in 2010. At first, it was just a competition between butchers, but everything changed when the Space League opened in 2022. And it was then that the real battle for survival with other beings began. Representatives of the Earth, coming from space, continued to lose. It is now 2023, and only 10 countries have remained on Earth since the monster invasion. These were different countries scattered across continents that still had the potential to fight. However, the Earth was still under threat of destruction. At the same time, during the battle, a monster that invaded from space, preparing to strike, fired a deadly beam that destroyed everything in its path. Before the behemoth could destroy the group of fighters, his intentions were interrupted by a guy hovering over him in the air. Angry that he was interrupted from his plans, the monster shot his deadly beam upwards where the boy was. However, his attack did not affect the savior at all. Moreover, he survived the beam and rushed into the fight, swinging his fist and beginning to close the distance quickly. As a result of the clash, all the soldiers in the vicinity felt the shockwave and concrete fragments that flew in all directions. As soon as the column of dust around the monster cleared, one of the soldiers who had been knocked off his feet by the blow exclaimed in confusion, "This is simply impossible!" The next moment, standing on the body of the defeated monster that appeared from the spatial portal, the fighter received a system notification that everyone could see, saying that the US Earth was mission accomplished. At the same time, the astonished man sitting on the ground said in amazement that this was the power of the holy fighter. After the victory over the enemy, Song Ji-han, a member of the American leaders and ranked 7th on the list of leaders, did a great job. Turning his gaze to the man on top of the tall building, the boy heard that our beloved country, America, had won this battle again. Smiling slyly at the guy who had just eliminated a threat that could have damaged the entire planet, the man on the roof said, "This moment will remain in the history of all citizens, and I am your master." Folding his hands in front of him as he spoke, he added that Baron was a guild master of American leaders, the one who was ranked first in the world rankings among players. Immediately after the broadcast was over, the girl jumped off the roof and shouted Ji-han. Then she heard someone from the crowd standing behind Baron shout out, "Priestess, you can't come down right now." In response to the man's remark, the guild master said to leave her alone. He replied that the hippo's energy was still on the surface, after which the first number added that everything was fine. She was able to take care of herself. Immediately after calming down one of his subjects, the master of the American Leaders Guild mentally said, "He is very strong indeed." Looking down at the motionless monster where the other fighters groaned under the harmful effects of the energy, he added that the energy coming from its corpse alone would be enough to make most players faint. Baron continued to consider how powerful this monster could be, adding that he was probably much stronger in life. But to be able to stand next to him at the same time somewhere downstairs, the priestess who had dealt with the monster called out anxiously, "Ji-han, you're okay." Looking at her friend's condition, Sophia, who was a member of the American Leaders Guild and had the 3rd rank in it, exclaimed in concern, "Oh my God, your left hand." Noticing that her comrade had lost one of his limbs, the girl immediately took up her duties and used her healing skills. Continuing to restore the lost body part, Sophia told the boy that it would hurt a lot because of the hippo's sinister energy, so please be a little more patient, Ji-han. The next moment, seeing a bright glow in front of the boy who had defeated the monster, one of the men behind Baron exclaimed, "Mr. Baron, look down." As soon as the guild master turned his gaze in the direction the man was pointing, he noticed the chest and heard it was the reward for defeating the boss. Interested in the reward that appeared, the guild master jumped off the roof and shouted, "Hey, you two, get away from there!" While the monster's body began to disintegrate in the air, Baron and his subjects approached the chest and said, "I will know how to use this reward." Hearing that he wanted to take everything for himself, one of the group of fighters who had been initially targeted by the monster said with a disgruntled cackle that he had killed him. He heard his comrade respond, saying that what we can do is that the end of humanity is closer than ever and very real. The next moment, turning his gaze to the people gathered around the chest, he added, "These people remain our only hope." When the guild leader arrived at the chest, he shouted to the American leaders, "From now on, I will name the guild members who will receive the rewards." Hearing their leader's order, all the guild members obediently exclaimed, "Yes, master," leaving Jihan and the priestess behind. After hearing Baron's answer, the priestess announced the numbers 4 and 5 on this list. Hearing the nominees for awards, Sophia exclaimed in surprise, "Wait, Mr. Baron." Trying to get justice, the girl nervously exclaimed, "But what about Jihan? He was the one who killed the monster of the apocalypse." Continuing to express her concern, she added, "Why don't you give him a reward for In response, she heard you ask why in a disgruntled voice. Pointing the finger at the guy who lost his arm after the battle, the guild master of the American leaders exclaimed that he was not an American. After this statement, Baron looked at the girl with a stern look and added that even if he was considered to be one, he was not a real American. He was just not. A helpful dog for us, that's all. And after hearing his name, the guy bent his head down and began to look at the man sternly, showing his anger. Continuing to seek justice, the priestess nervously exclaimed, "But Jihan, calm down. It's okay, I don't mind." Turning his back on the stingy guildmaster of American leaders, the boy said disgruntledly, moving away from the group, "Just go away, I don't care." And then mentally said he was absolutely right. Recalling his past, where he lost everything, Sung Jihan said in his head, "I'm just a refugee who fled after losing his homeland." The boy mentally added, raising his hand to make sure that it was really not a dream and that he was still alive. I managed to climb to 7th place in the world ranking. However, despite all these achievements, he was not recognized as an American after reaching 7th place in the world ranking. He was often forced to experience all possible discrimination. But it was not that important. Still, he managed to endure these feelings and discrimination somehow because there was a reason that tormented him much more, and that was this. Sitting in a broken-down car somewhere far from my guild, which was sharing the treasure for defeating the monster, Sung Jihan added to the guilt that I was the only one who managed to survive. Having finished his reflections on his horrible life, the guy applied his recovery magic and mentally said to himself to concentrate on treating his arm, and soon I would get the results of my mission. As soon as Sung Jihan completed treating his limb, he received a system notification stating the end of the game and the results of the relegation mission in the Bronze League. At the same time, other survivors received system notifications informing them that the mission was a defense mission and that more than half of the US players' survival was successful. While they were happy to have survived the mission, the soldiers also looked at the other notifications that kept appearing, which reported China's success and Russia's failure. After one country was declared a failure in the mission, others followed, with Japan also reported as a failure, Brazil a failure, and all the others who also participated in the mission failing. The final result of the mission was unsatisfactory. After seeing the results of this task, one of the fighters who was not in the American Leaders Guild exclaimed with concern that only 2 countries out of 10 were not. The next moment, after the announcement of the results of all countries and the overall result, another notification appeared, informing us that humanity number 4,212 had failed to prevent the demotion. There are also others who lost in the mission to prevent relegation. In the final battle for the decision to relegate, you will face the number 4,773 orcs. Seeing that they still had a chance to prevent the destruction of humanity, one of the members of the American Leaders Guild, standing near the guildmaster, said in surprise that years. The next moment, seeing who they would fight against in the final battle for survival, Sophia exclaimed, "Master, if we are facing orcs, we need Jihan. We won in the last fight with the orcs thanks to him." In response to the girl's request to join the team for the final battle, the guildmaster stubbornly said no, and we should not even ask to go there without him. At the same time, while all the fighters of the final battle were moving to the battlefield, a notification appeared above the arena, stating that players from each planet were being called up and the battle would soon begin. As soon as all the players stepped onto the battlefield, the guildmaster said menacingly, "It's been a long time since we've seen each other." Continuing to drill the enemy with his gaze, Baron looked at the orc leader with whom he would have to fight and said, "Disgusting pigs." After a loud greeting from the enemies, the American leader's guild leader looked back and said there were only 4 of us and a Chinese runner. After listing the forces that should act in this battle against the enemy, he mentally added, "Well, we don't need Song Ji Han. We can handle the battle without him." Preparing for the decisive battle, Baron gritted his teeth in anger and activated his power, angrily saying in his head, "I can handle everything myself." As soon as the man strengthened all his characteristics with the help of the skill, he immediately rushed at his enemies, shouting out, "I am a representative of humanity." But all he had were his loud words, and in just one moment, the man, unable to do anything to the enemy, lost his head from his shoulders. When all the other players saw what had just happened to their number 1, who could not do anything to the enemy, they immediately froze in fear. At the same time, all the members of the human race who remained on their planet could watch the live broadcast of the battle, which was what everyone was doing at the time, and witness the imminent death of the first number. As soon as Baron's head was separated from his body, an ample notification appeared on the screen of all live broadcasts, saying that the player of the representatives of humanity had died. The next moment, the remaining players split up to try to at least somehow resist the enemies, but even this did not have any effect. Another orc struck with his axe, dividing one of the people into 2 parts, and the system notified the human player that he was killed. Also, having killed 2 more who they managed to catch among the people who tried to oppose them, the orcs easily dealt with them. After that, notifications appeared that a representative of humanity had died, which was duplicated twice. At the same time, approaching the priestess, who was still the last one alive, the orc leader swung his axe and said, "Thank you, human, because you are so weak, we managed." Immediately after striking and killing the last representative, everyone watching the broadcast saw a system notification that said the game was over, number 4212, and humanity lost and was expelled from the Bronze League. There is no lower league than the Bronze one, number 4212, and humanity was deemed unworthy. Turning her attention to where it was coming from, she noticed a black hole at her feet that suddenly appeared and slowly grew. At the same time, a system notification appeared that said the deletion was about to begin. After the rest of the planet's inhabitants saw this message, the black hole suddenly grew to a gigantic size with a radius of about 30 meters and began to suck everything around it. Continuing to grow at an incredible rate, the black hole's radius increased so much that it reached Sung Ji Han, who was quite far from the center of the hole. Not realizing what was happening, the guy looked at the deep darkness inside the black hole into which he had plunged and thought, "Is this the end of the world?" After a certain period, when the black hole completely swallowed the planet, it disappeared without a trace, after which a system notification appeared that humanity's removal had been successfully completed. After that, it would seem that everything should have been completed, but it happened differently. After the cleaning was completed, an alarm notification appeared that said an error was detected, and people were still left. At the same time, in an incomprehensible position, the guy looked at the void and said in surprise that I was the only survivor again. After that, he saw a message in front of him. "Nameless divine art resists removal." When he saw the notification, Sung Ji Han was surprised to think that the nameless divine art was being resisted. Then he received a notification that said, "Resisting deletion means interesting." The next moment, a skill description appeared that said, "Nameless divine art skill rank, SSS skill, conveyed the requirements for improvement in parts. If you remake the 3 divine secrets for yourself or learn the real name of the nameless one, you can fully awaken the skill." After which, he mentally added, "I wonder if things could have turned out differently if I had been able to awaken this power." Upon completing his thoughts, the boy noticed messages above him that looked like someone talking to him, saying that this creature was weak but had potential, and that he should not miss this opportunity. Then he thought, "I wish I knew the real name of the nameless divine art." The next moment, he received another message asking if he should give it another chance. Then he added, "I wonder if Korea would still be here and if I could protect the people I love." In response to the question of the deity who launched the poll about giving a second chance, he answered, "I agree. I disagree. It's a waste of time. I support the idea. At the end of the voting, one of the deities spoke. The votes were accepted, and player Song Ji-han will be returned to the era of first entering the league. Seeing this notification, he thought the first entry was that. Before realizing what had happened, he woke up in his own world when the TV presenter said, "Well, now we'll get to the interview." Grabbing his head, the boy said in confusion what had happened to me. I read for sure that I was returning to the era before the first entry. Tilkivin powtórив u swojej głowie ostatnie powiadomienia, które baczywiak ozirnувшись навколо здивовано промовив "Zaczekajcie na це місце." As he began to realize what had happened to him and that it wasn't a dream, Sung Ji-han said in surprise that it really happened. "I'm definitely not dreaming." It was the year 2020, and the boy was transported back several years to his city in South Korea, which had not yet been attacked and turned into ruins. Looking down from the balcony, he saw two boys fighting with sticks and shouting, "I am the king of swords, Yoon Sejin," to which he heard in response, "Yoon Sejong." Using two swords means "I am the king of swords," after which the first one added dreams and then continued. The next moment, he turned his gaze to a slightly different place and saw a couple in love. The girl was hugging her boyfriend from behind and asking if he was playing today. He heard the answer. Of course, the tutorial would be over soon. After assessing the situation behind his house, the guy realized it was true and said, "I really came back." The next moment, deciding to see if everything was exactly the same as it had been at the exact moment in the past, Sung Ji-han suddenly said to open the status window. Immediately afterwards, he saw that there was a second tier under his name, and he thoughtfully said in his head, "Second tier," as we had just joined the league. He smiled nervously at the realization of what had happened to him and said, "It is possible if I use information from my past life." Before he could finish his thought, he turned his head to the photo of his family and confidently said, "No, I have to change it this time. I will definitely protect everyone." Having received hope and a new opportunity to change the future, Sun Ji-han closed his eyes. He added, "This time I will do everything to make things different." Having gained the confidence and courage to change the world, the boy spoke sternly, "Because I had the opportunity to see the end of this game and come back." In the year 2000, many people came to the stadiums to cheer for their team at the International BattleNets competition. Korea was still in a strong position. 11 of the strongest players in the world were considered the best, and 11 were ranked third on this list. South Korea's unshakable place in the world was due to its sword king, Yoon Sejin. Korea's pride and true treasure, thanks to his participation as the strongest warrior, Korea has always managed to maintain a high position in Northeast Asia. But let's just make a small correction to this. It was destined to last forever. After the next competition, he gave an interview to the national hero TV channels, saying that "I am Yoon Sejin." Standing on the podium with hundreds of cameras and millions of viewers watching him, he said, "I have decided to change my name to Ryuhei and to become a full-fledged citizen of Japan." And in July of 2020, he joined the new self-defense forces. On that day, the Korean Battle Network received the biggest shock in its history. Sitting in front of the TV in his home, a guy watching an interview said, "From now on, please address me as Ito Ryuhei," Sung Ji-han added. "I came back that very day." Gritting his teeth after hearing for the second time how the national treasure had decided to betray them, the boy added unhappily, "That face has always annoyed me since Sejin left the post of Korean representative and the country plunged into chaos." After broadcasting a report from the scene, the news anchor added that this is how the King of the Sword really left us. With this shocking news, increasing voices are expressing concern about Korea's ranking in the league. Hearing the words of the host, Sun Ji, I thought Korea, which until now had been able to stay in the top echelons, faced with constant defeats and a terrifying rate of falling between the tapes within the league, we failed in literally everything. At the same time, the pair of hosts said that despite all this, some analysts note that there should not be any significant changes in the ranking because there are still many bright and promising young people in our country. We hope that Korea will remain in the top 20. Picking up the remote control and turning off the TV, Ji-han said with a disgruntled expression, and it was no wonder that they had performed poorly. No one could compensate for Yoon Sejin's absence. Putting his head down, the boy thought that everything would have been different if he had at least a little more time, but BattleNet was too cruel. If we recall the first appearance of BattleNet and the players' impressions, it was just an ordinary game for everyone. However, 2 years later, the Space League began, turning this ordinary game into a battle for survival if someone lost their life in the game. Recalling what happened to their world after the start of the Space League and what monsters came to them, he added that, in reality, he died in countries that fell to the bottom of the ladder, and monsters appeared. After the countries at the bottom of the ladder were saturated, a one-sided massacre began, where they were simply eradicated by the government. And as expected, after Yoon Sejin left Korea, the country rapidly descended to the bottom of the rankings. As soon as this position reached a sufficiently low level, monsters visited it and destroyed it, along with its population, like all other countries. Continuing to think in his room, Jin Han spoke, and those who survived the attack began to gather in groups and say the following. If the King of the Sword had stayed here, Korea would have had a different ending. After these conversations, one can roughly imagine how significant and influential the swordmaster Yoon Sejin was for the country. He added that looking at the photo of this national hero with his wife and young son, he was my brother-in-law. Punching the glass right in the face of the Sword King, he exclaimed angrily, "But I still keep asking myself the same question." With his head down as he was overwhelmed with rage, the boy angrily asked why my sister fell in love with a scoundrel like him. Removing his hand from the painting in his room, Sung Ji-han thoughtfully said, "I wonder if everything would have been entirely different if she had lived." After a rage, the man tamed his emotions and realized that he needed to move on. He said, "It's great that I'm back in the past, but I'm not going back to the past." After opening his profile to view his performance, the guy assessed his capabilities and said disappointedly that my performance was too poor. Sitting down on his couch and holding his head, the guy said disappointedly, "Well, for some reason I'm not surprised. After all, I spent my time drinking and gambling at that time." After opening his eyes and realizing that he could not repeat his mistakes, he looked at his profile and added, "I was too rough in the past." Focusing on the profile description, where the gift of the traveler's IF was written, you can see details about other players. I added the nickname Sun Ji because I didn't even realize what an incredible power I had. Everyone becomes a player after reaching the age of 18, but only a very small number of players receive gifts. The next moment, recalling his past life, he added, "Since I had the lowest rank of F, I used this ability in gambling games in which I predicted the winner. I had no idea at the time that this ability's true value would reveal its full potential once I was able to duplicate it." Looking again at his characteristics in the profile, the guy once again became convinced of his worthlessness at the moment and said, "These indicators are too terrible. Such indicators are present in the first level in general. How did I get the second level at all?" Immediately after noticing the bottle lying on the ground, the guy said, I'm sure he remembered exactly what happened now. Looking at the spilled potion and the bottle on the table, Songji confidently said, "It was the experience point potion, and that's how I accidentally raised my level." Once again, plunging into memories from the past, he said disappointedly, "Some idiot drank it under the shade and raised his level. I have no words for the emotions I had in the past. It's horrible." At the end of his regrets about his past, the guy rubbed his neck in embarrassment. He accidentally saw something visible in his profile and mentally said, "What the hell is this?" When he saw the number of achievement points, he was surprised to hear me say why I had so many points, 100,000, when I hadn't had so many last time. Reflecting on his current situation, Jihan said, "If you put aside the fact that they are just useless and worthless, I don't think I had any achievements before I joined the league, so how did I get them?" Getting up from his seat and making circles around the room, the guy thoughtfully said in his head, wondering if any changes could have occurred due to my regression. He then said to open the inventory. Seeing a strange item in his inventory, the guy exclaimed in amazement that it was opening the description. He saw a coupon for exchanging achievement points rank EX advantage of the last survivor who chose to test himself again. When you visit this, you cannot sell. After reading the description of this achievement points exchange coupon, the guy was surprised to hear that only I could use it. Clicking on the point exchange coupon, the guy said in surprise, "This is the EX rank," after which he received a system notification that you have used the achievement point exchange coupon. Immediately after activating the coupon, Sungji received another notification saying that the achievement store had been added, and he was impressed, saying it was just incredible. Right in front of his eyes appeared the golden system window of the store, which read, Achievement Store Level 1 Upgrade, Achievement Store, 20,000 points status window expansion, 10,000 additional class slot, 10,000. Then he mentally added, It's scary to imagine how much it could be sold for. The next moment, the guy said thoughtfully, looking at the store, I wonder if the improvement will make the selection larger. I need something I can use right away, and now my choice is not very wide. Upon completing his thoughts, he reached for the button to improve the store for 20,000 achievement points and said, well, I'll try to improve the store. As soon as he pressed the button, he received a system notification that said the achievement store now had a second level of inventory expansion added. Seeing this, Seungji thought to himself, no, I'll try it again. Clicking on the enhancement button again, he received a notification saying the achievement store can now add a nickname to the third level. Then he thought it would not be necessary now either. Looking at his stock of achievement points, of which he had only half, the guy thoughtfully said, I have only 50,000 points on my balance sheet. Turning his attention to the price of upgrading to the fourth level, he added, if I upgrade my store to the fourth level now, I will have only 10,000 points left, and the higher the level, the more expensive the upgrade will be. So then I have only two options. Looking at the list of things he had in the achievement store, the guy, contemplating the right choice, said to buy everything available now, or take a chance and upgrade to the fourth level. Having made his next choice, the guy reached for the store improvement button and confidently said, I'll just try something that can help me now, and then received a notification that the store had reached the fourth level. Also, according to the system notification, as the store's level increased, another appeared in which it was written that the skill of immediate restoration was added. Not realizing what he had received, the guy looked for the skill tab and said, in surprise, what is this? When he found the description of the skill, he saw that in the description of immediate restoration, you can restore faulty things to perfect condition. Smiling slyly after he got it, the guy covered his eyes with his hand, sighed heavily, and said, no, this is not good with him. We need to end it. Immediately after smiling happily after receiving the skill, he added, that's why I couldn't just stop betting. I definitely hit the jackpot. Upon completion of spending his achievement points, the boy headed to the room with the game supplies, touching his hand to the fingerprint scanner to open it. He heard the recognition, complete, you are a member of the Song Ji-han family. When the boy heard who he was to the Sword King, in whose house he was currently living, he was surprised to hear that he was a family member and then slyly added, here is Yoon Sejin's playroom. Sitting comfortably on a chair in the game room to immerse himself in the game, Seungji turned on the system and said, only the system recognizes me as a family member, even though the owner is no longer here. When the chair turned on, Ji-han received a system notification that said, you have opened the inventory of the connection to the battle network. After which he happily added, well, I'll gladly take it for granted. Immediately after opening the inventory and seeing the spoiled bone, Dongfang Shuo ranked a useless spoiled brush. Song Ji confidently said, this is my first key. Using his newly acquired skills, the guy confidently asked to apply the skill of immediate restoration. The crafting effects appeared on the object's icon the next moment, along with a system notification that Dunfan Shuo had restored the damaged brush. After a few seconds, the notification came that the recovery was complete, and the boy reached for the object and washed it just fine. Recalling the powerful man who once owned this object, Ji-han confidently said, well, now my preparation is complete. Upon completion of the restoration, the object's description changed. Now the boy was holding a brush of Dongfang Shuo, rank SS, the brush of the famous writer Dongfang Shuo, which preserves the connection with the god of war. A system notification appeared before he could finish everything he had planned, telling him that the Bronze League tutorial would start soon. When he saw it, the guy instantly grabbed a brush, called up the status window, and began to draw something nervously, saying, I had little time left. The system window was counting down with 10 seconds left before the call. As he continued to correct his characteristics and change his description, Sung Ji-han nervously said in his head, I was able to rise to 7th place and receive the title of Holy Fighter. Quickly changing his characteristics in an emergency to get what he wanted, he added that this all happened thanks to a characteristic that combines strength, agility, and health, which are rare characteristics. Creating something incredible in his profile with the help of a recovered object, Sung Ji said this brush was abandoned because it was damaged, but thanks to the two words now written on it. It was the beginning of my regaining my former glory, awakening my true power, and acquiring a unique skill. As he was finishing up the last seconds of adding what he wanted to his stats, Ji-han suddenly interrupted. After that, the player Sun Ji-han, who was in the arena, received a system notification and entered the Battle Network League. Having no idea whether he had completed what he started, the guy found himself in the Coliseum and received an accompanying notification. Your task in this test is to survive. Recalling the battles that took place in his past life during the tutorial, Sung-ji received a system notification that said, "We hope that together with hundreds of players, you will be able to survive the fight against the monsters of the Coliseum." As soon as half of the available players are left in the arena, the challenge will automatically end, and we wish good luck to all tutorial participants. The next moment, holding the famous writer's brush in his hand, the boy who was in the arena with 99 other players said in surprise, "Coliseum means yes." Immediately after he hurried to open his status window, he anxiously said in his head for 1 minute, "What about my combat power to open the status window?" As soon as he looked at the profile, he received a system notification that said the characteristics of strength, agility, and health were combined into combat power. As soon as the desired characteristic came to his attention, the guy moved the writer's brush to his inventory and received another notification that he had completed the unique characteristic and received 10,000 achievement points. With a sly smile after seeing what he had seen, the boy confidently said, "Well, we met again, even in this reaping, although much earlier." Looking at the characteristic of the military strength score with 5 points, he mentally added, "Of course, this is only one step towards obtaining the nameless divine art, but with this, I will pass the Bronze League." When preparations for the battle began, Ji-han received a warning that you logged in without connecting to the battle connector. You feel 100% of the game if you do not use the connector. Sighing in disappointment after receiving the warning, the guy said, "I remember it well," and then mentally added a world where money reduces pain. At that time, people could still reduce the pain they experienced in the game with the help of a connector, and the one Yoon Se-jin had was a high-quality product that could reduce 99% of the pain. Having completed his recollection of the device used by the Sword King, Song-ji closed his eyes and mentally said, "Well, I'll use it later." The next moment, hearing the sound of another system notification, the boy opened his eyes. He saw the description of the open achievement window. Immediately, another notification informed you that you had received a restricted quest. Surprised by the opportunity he was given, the guy said it was a limited task. I had not seen anything like it in the past. The task description says to reach the top one in the tutorial and be rewarded with 1,000 points of achievement. When he saw the reward for this limited task, the guy smiled slyly and said in his head, "Well, now that I have the characteristic of combat potential, it will be easy for me to do." Having completed his thoughts and noticed the notification about the start of the game, the guy confidently said, "Well, let's get started," and then felt the enemy approaching him from behind. Having made his insidious attack on the guy who seemed unprepared for the battle and whose attention was focused on another fighter, he cunningly shouted, "You're a noobier," and got caught. Only his arrogance and joy quickly dissipated after his attack, and the attacker felt something strange, unlike the feeling of being hit by an enemy. As the dust from the attack cleared, the attacker witnessed the tip of his blade being caught by just 2 fingers, after which he heard a superior voice say, "Yes, that's it." Looking back over his shoulder at the enemy, who thought he was an easy target, Sun-ji said with a grudging smile, "This is the most enjoyable content in this game." Forcing his attacker into confusion after a failed attack, Ji-han added in an ominous tone, "Thank you for my first kill." So one of the existing forces of player management in this game is the Guild, a group that trains and manages a large number of players. At the same time, as all countries were actively discussing the combat network, each country began to invest considerable resources in the education of its players. Similarly, with the aggressive investment of various enterprises in different players, large and small guilds existed in South Korea. They were able to train strong players in the early stages of the league. The first region of Cannes in the recently launched Bronze League is the same place where rising stars who were members of various guilds made their debut. After receiving a system notification that the game was about to start, one of the players in the Cannes arena was visibly nervous. Looking around to assess the level of training of each enemy, the boy said anxiously, "The Kanama League is the next step for me." Trying to control his emotions, the boy said nervously, "No, I can't be nervous. Everything will be fine. I'll be more lucky than everyone else. This guy's name is Du-ha Yu." Clenching his hand into a fist, the man said confidently, "I can do it." He was one of the members of the Divergent Guild, a group subordinate to the Divergent Company. Being quite well known among a large number of players, It also had many promising participants who had to prove themselves and become powerful fighters. Agility rank. A gift increases agility by 25 units. This ability allows you to ignore the league's restrictions on stats. An ordinary young man, guy, could join there after receiving the gift of agility rank A. Grabbing his sword to be ready for a sudden battle, Yu thought, only a small number of people can receive the A-ranked gift. If so, I can definitely be in the top 50. The next moment, the guy started looking around him and said, well, who will be my first opponent? After assessing the strength of his opponents, who had already defeated their opponents before entering the battle, or looked quite dangerous, he nervously said, I understand everything. Retreating from the square where active hostilities were taking place, he thought, I'm not going to touch them for now. It's better to regroup somewhere else. Looking for a safe place to hide, the boy confidently said, in the end, the most important thing is to stay alive. I will be destroyed if I start to fight with them here. Looking at the crowd of players who looked impressive with their strong armor or magical capes, Yu thought that most of them were representatives of large guilds and had quite good equipment, which was not like the Bronze League. Suddenly, he caught sight of a boy who seemed to be a real weakling, and he said in surprise, I don't understand what this is. Watching Jihan looking at something in Yu's status window, he mentally told him that he was sent to the wrong place and would participate in the Bronze League in this form. Trying to realize how this could have happened to him, the guild representative confusedly added a shirt and underwear, saying he was a newcomer who had been accidentally drafted here. Clutching his sword tightly in his hand and preparing to attack the easy prey, he confidently said in his head, this can only mean one thing to me. He took a stance for a quick attack, and then rushed into the fight, mentally adding, I can get an easy point of destruction for my opponent. A moment before he struck his lightweight opponent, Yu thought to himself, I can't believe I'm so lucky, but I am a lucky man. Then he exclaimed, I don't know who you are, but I'll be grateful then. A few seconds after the attack, when he saw that his sword was caught with 2 fingers, he asked in confusion what was going on in this test. Not realizing what had just happened right before his eyes, the guy confusedly said in his head that he had just blocked my sword with 2 fingers, and then said how he could even react at the speed of my A-rank agility skill. The next moment, flying backward after being thrown aside like a typical puppy, Yu fell to the ground and groaned heavily. After neutralizing his opponent, Sungji looked over his shoulder, looked at his opponent with a contemptuous look, and said, You're so confident. You came to participate in the Gangnam Bronze League with such a gift. Hearing the superior attitude towards him and his skills, Yu, barely holding back his tears, insulted and exclaimed, How dare you? My A-rank agility is not just some kind of gift, you bastard. Hearing the question from the enemy who attacked him from behind, Jihan confidently said, I will not deny your words. In response, he heard an angry tone. This bastard, you are serious now. Gritting my teeth in anger to keep from giving away too much, Yu mentally said, What kind of a pauper with no equipment in his underwear and t-shirt dares to look at me with a superior look, full of confidence just because he blocked one attack? Immediately after he finished expressing his insults towards the guy standing before him in his own thoughts, the guild representative got to his feet and shouted, I'm going to pounce on you with all my speed. Hearing his opponent's threat, Sungji mentally said, He's going to attack me with all his might, and to be honest, I shouldn't have taken his speed so lightly before. At the same moment, while conducting his attack, Yu mentally said, I'm sure I'm faster than him. Despite all his hopes, his opponent was able to dodge the first blow at breakneck speed. But this did not stop him. He continued to diligently strike at Jihan, trying to somehow hurt him with his attack, but each time he only failed. As the battle continued with the guild representative Sun Ji dodging his enemy's attacks, I thought, I know it is difficult to instantly switch to the second level. Watching his opponent's movements as he approached him repeatedly, the guy added that he was not fast. Instead, I was too slow and it would be difficult. Immediately after smiling slyly after studying his opponent's movements, he confidently said in his head, If I were in his place, I would say this as a person who has experienced a lot of battles. Continuing to dodge the enemy's attacks, as soon as he began to show their trajectory, Sungji added in his head, I can say for sure that its trajectory is just apparent. Having dodged his opponent's attack again and broken the distance by a few meters, he looked at his hand and thoughtfully said, I can see all his movements. After losing 1 second of concentration on thinking, Jihan noticed that the enemy had again tried to harm him by swinging his sword. But despite the suddenness and the split second lost in reacting, Sunji took the blow, and instead of dodging it, he used a technique to disarm the enemy. Feeling pain and tingling in his hand, Do Haegyu looked at his right hand, which was missing something, and confusedly said, "I don't know where it went." After disarming the enemy, Ji-han threw his opponent's sword into the air, jumped right behind him, and grabbed Do Haegyu's weapon behind his back. As a result of this maneuver, the boy could attack and drive his sword straight into Do Haegyu's throat, thus winning the fight. As soon as his opponent pulled the sword out of his throat, Do Haegyu groaned heavily and said in confusion, "I can't believe this is happening." The next moment, as the guild representative fell to his feet and began disintegrating midair after his defeat, Ji-san swung his sword to wipe off the remaining blood. In the last seconds of his stay in the arena after his defeat in the battle with the hungry man Do Haegyu, he angrily shouts goodbye. "Next time we meet, I will win. Just wait for that time." Hearing the threats from the guy who had just lost to him with complete equipment and whose only gear was his underwear, I sighed heavily. I thought, just imagine, he's already talking about the next time, even though he's already dead. Immediately after the enemy disappeared from the battlefield, his sword disappeared. Then Sungji received a system notification that you had destroyed the first enemy in the tutorial mode and received 100 achievement points. Having lost the enemy's weapon, which he had stolen from him honestly, Ji-han looked at his empty hand and said in disappointment, "When a player dies, his weapon disappears with him." Immediately after looking around to find his opponents, he thoughtfully added in his head, "Now that I've been able to warm up, maybe I should hurry up if I really want to take first place. I need to destroy more than 5 people to ensure a solid first place." The next moment, he saw a crowd of orcs standing on the sidelines, waiting for the battle to begin, and Ji-han mentally said to himself, "As expected, no one wants to hunt monsters." In addition to ordinary players, there are monsters in the battle network. Still, only 1/10 of a player's destruction is awarded for one monster's destruction. You must finish off a dozen monsters for one player's destruction to count. Watching the players running away from the orcs with the words, "Oh my god, it's scary when they approach," Sungji mentally said, and that's why most players avoid and hunt other players, especially when it comes to monsters that gather in a crowd, especially orcs. Continuing the hunt for these monsters is rather pointless because the risks are high, and there is no particular benefit. In other words, it is an unjustified effort. Upon completing his thoughts, the boy received a new system notification in which a new task was written. Destroy the crowd of orcs, a crowd of 30 orcs, the most substantial group of monsters in the Colosseum, and show them the difference in strength and defeat them with a reward of 500 points of achievement. Songji mentally estimated the reward he would receive for this task. However, hunting monsters is inefficient, and this reward of 500 points is 5 times more than the reward for the first kill. Concentrating his attention on the 30-person crowd he was tasked with overcoming, Ji-han said, "I see no reason to refuse this offer." Heading toward the orcs huddled together, the boy said, stretching his neck, "Those are just monsters. They're nothing compared to real orcs." Immediately after these thoughts, the boy rushed toward his enemies. He thought, "Maybe I'm just crazy, and that's all, and that's the end of the reasons, and this option cannot be rejected." At the same time, one of the orcs pointed a finger toward Ji-han, who was heading in their direction at a frantic speed, and said in confusion what it was. Having drawn the attention of the rest of his comrades to the boy who was approaching them at breakneck speed, he nervously added, "A naked man is running towards us." Hearing the notification, another orc replied that the man was crazy. Standing in battle formation, the crowd of orcs prepared for battle with the enemy approaching them, shouting, "We will destroy you." Ignoring his enemy's warnings, Ji-san continued his offensive. At the same time, the enemies were preparing to launch a long-range attack to stop the approaching enemy. At the exact moment, Sungji could see 2 axes heading straight for him, which the enemies had just thrown in his direction to stop him. Waiting for the right opportunity, when the enemy's weapons came closer to him, Ji-han confidently spoke, now and then reached for his gun. He could instantly grab the handles of 2 axes that the orcs threw at him with frantic speed and force. After receiving a weapon with which he could safely conduct an offensive, Songji exclaimed, "Not bad, but now you get your axe back. I'll teach you how to throw it." Immediately after these words, the guy threw 2 axes toward the crowd of enemies standing a few meters away and quickly neutralized a couple of orcs. Seeing what had just happened to a couple of their comrades, the monsters immediately became worried because the enemy seemed quite capable. The realization that the battle would be difficult made them feel afraid. While the enemies were looking at the same spot the boy was coming, he could break through the crowd and run inside. Immediately after the frenzied massacre began, Sunji grabbed an axe from one of the enemies. He prepared to launch a spinning attack over a large area. With just one punch, he took several heads off his shoulders. Then he received a system notification saying 5 of 30 enemies were destroyed. The next moment, seeing how quickly the ranks of their fighters were thinning, one of the orcs froze in place and grunted in confusion, not even knowing what to do next. However, this effect did not last long. After a couple of seconds, when the monsters came to their senses and realized that the man was surrounded by them, they all attacked him to finish him off. But they failed. Jihan continued to read the movements of each enemy. In parallel with their evasions, he intercepted each one's weapon and thinned the opponent's ranks. Continuing to wage an unequal battle against 30 opponents, the boy rapidly reduced the number of monsters. He then suddenly heard a nervous shout of a man destroying it. At that exact moment, Sungji felt a specific danger approaching him from the left side, so he moved out of the way of the blow and grabbed the spear with which they were going to pierce him and broke it into 2 pieces. When the weapon was broken, the attacker, who remained unarmed, was left alone among a certain number of his fallen comrades, one-on-one against a man who had already mowed down most of the orcs. Frightened by this development, the monster holding a useless stick grunted in fright. At the same moment, grabbing an axe lying on the ground nearby, Jihan said, "I wish someone had told you not to be so noisy when you're sitting in an ambush." Watching his inevitable death approaching, the orc tried to defend himself with the stick he had left against the broken spear. Having made a stroke, Sungji broke the axe, but without achieving the desired result, he failed to destroy the enemy, as the stick was more potent than the boy's weapon handle. The next moment, looking at what remained of the broken weapon in his hands, Jihan said in disappointment, "Dude, what kind of weapon is this? Look how big you are, and the gun is just a piece of junk." Seeing that the guy had no axe left, the surviving orc exclaimed that the man's weapon was broken and that he heard in response, "Well, actually, you have one too." After which he added indifferently, "Now finish him off." Seeing a crowd of enemies coming at him again from all sides, Songji said in disappointment, "This is a shame. Just look at yourself. Life doesn't teach you anything." Preparing to use his trump card, the guy raised 1 foot above the ground and said, "What stupid little pigs you are." Immediately after stomping his foot on the ground, Jihan formed a crater under him, unleashing a cat's shockwave that scattered all the monsters approaching him. After the shockwave knocked a bunch of orcs, Sunji jumped up to catch the weapon they had accidentally dropped. He instantly dealt with 4 nearby enemies when he grabbed the sword and spear. Immediately after noticing several enemies standing in a row, Sunji swung his spear straight at the enemies, thus piercing 3 more orcs in 1 blow. After a short period and a certain number of enemies had been destroyed, the orc leader, the last one left on the battlefield, looked around frightenedly, trying to find who might still be alive. Realizing that the only one who could do anything else was the monster, he looked at Jihan. He said, "He's definitely not human. He's an absolute monster," and then he lost his head in the literal sense of the word, and Songji made a last-ditch effort with his sword and split the monster into 2. Immediately after the last destruction, the boy received a system notification saying that you have completed the task of exterminating a crowd of orcs. Also, after the notification of the completion of the mission, the guy received a reward notification that said you received 500 achievement points for successfully completing the quest. Your level has been increased. When he saw the last notifications he received, he was surprised to hear that I'd been able to increase my level inside the game, and that experience points should be counted at the end of the game. Immersed in reflection after suddenly receiving a new level, the guy mentally said it all because of the low level. Well, for me it's good news, so I will be able to raise my characteristics at the same time. Looking at his total number of points on the various characteristics, Songji thoughtfully said, "Well, let's see. If I have to increase one characteristic, it will definitely be combat strength." The characteristic of combat strength is a unique indicator that combines the 3 attributes of agility and endurance. Even if people had the same indicators of various statistics, this insane characteristic can at least double your abilities. Continuing to look at the same characteristic that stood out from all the others, He mentally added, "Of course, there is another reason why combat power is special to me." Recalling the moment when he reached a particular value of this characteristic in his past life, the boy confidently added, "As soon as I get the 30 mark of combat strength, I will have a chance to receive an unnamed martial art." Pointing at the plus sign next to the characteristic of combat strength, the guy said, "I must get this skill as soon as possible." Sungji mentally continued to poke at the button. Still, there is one problem. Combat strength is not an indicator that can be easily increased. And then he saw something strange, he said in surprise. I mean, really. Seeing that his combat strength actually increased by 1 unit after adding the distribution point, Jihan was surprised to learn that it really did increase. Recalling his past life and how this characteristic was increased, he added with amazement that a certain amount of combat experience and training is usually required to increase combat strength. The points could only increase the maximum growth rate. Immediately afterward, with a sly smile, the boy added, "Isn't it cool?" and then thought, "I don't know what exactly happened, but if she keeps growing like this, I'll be happy." The next moment, feeling the danger behind his back, the guy stepped aside, after which an arrow flew right by him and hit him in the head. After avoiding a long-range attack, the guy started looking for the enemy who had just attacked him and said in his head that it was the shooter. At the same time, somewhere near Jihan stood a girl who shot an arrow and smiled happily, saying, "Just look, he dodged it." The knight standing next to her added, "What a lucky man." After a failed shot, the girl, continuing to keep the guy in sight, said, "Let's finish as soon as possible because the end is very close." She heard the man in armor reply, "Yes, as promised. Whoever destroys him first takes the reward. Yes." At the same time, watching the pair of fighters confidently exchanging words, Sung Ji mentally said that it looked like they had united and that this would happen quite often. This survival card is intended for a battle between players, but there is no such rule that participants in the same struggle cannot create their own teams. The next moment, paying attention to the shoulder of the girl shooter, he thoughtfully added, "And this logo is one of the 10 best guilds in Korea, the Turtle Guild." Taking out his sword from its sheath, the boy mentally said, "A warrior and an archer combine melee and ranged attacks. If they are from the same guild, it is unsurprising." After receiving a system notification that only 60 players remained, Sungji thought to himself that there were so few left. So if I just dodged, I'd still survive. After concluding his conclusion about how to survive to the end of this competition, the guy mentally said, "But if they came to deal with me, then what?" Standing in front of a couple of enemies, he added that I was probably an easy target for them. Then he heard a warrior shout to the girl, "If you agree to go to dinner with me after this, I'll give you a steak," to which she replied, "No thanks, I'll pass." At the same time, while the enemies were distracted by their conversations, Tessan took advantage of the free time to call up the leaderboard. After reviewing his results and position in the overall ranking, he mentally said, "I have 4 laps left." Looking at the second place winner, who was 1 point short of tying for first place, the boy added, "I'm barely holding on to first place." After assessing his position in the ranking, he added, with a sly smile, "It's just perfect. I could consolidate my position with their help." At the same time, pulling the bowstring of her bow, the girl said mockingly to her ally, "You should be ashamed of yourself, given our age difference." As soon as she said this, Sungji made his first move, separating the girl's head from her body, and then said in his head, "I'll test my power of improved combat strength right here." After neutralizing one of the enemies, Jihan saw a system notification that said there were 58 survivors, and that the tutorial was ending. The next moment, with some trepidation in his voice and trembling in his whole body after what he had seen, the man in armor said, "How could you do that to a girl?" In response to his question, he heard nothing. Still, he saw the enemy instantly disappear from his field of vision, moving right behind him. Immediately after a quick maneuver, Sunji used his weapon to stab his opponent in the back, hearing him suddenly scream. But this scream was probably fake and played up because the next moment, looking back and smiling slyly, the warrior said, "This is the exclusive armor of our Turtle Guild." Continuing to mock the futile attempt to harm him, the knight added, "You can't pierce it with such a weak weapon." As soon as he said this, he felt a flurry of blows that again hit him exactly, all aimed at the same point. Feeling that his armor began to crack, the man in the outfit exclaimed in embarrassment, "You crazy bastard!" Feeling his armor crumble under the onslaught of many attacks aimed at the same place, he added, "Your desire" at the same point. after punching a hole in the enemy's armor, through which he managed to finish him off, Sungji said, "What good is that woman or that armor to you if you're just fooling around here?" Smiling ominously after a fair speech addressed to a frivolous player, Jihan added, "It seems to me that you have to fully experience reality." Sometime after the Bronze League battle ended, one of the influential people gained access to the battle recording and began scrolling through it, observing one person in detail. Focusing on one moment in the video, the head of the 3rd Department of the Divergent Guild's Personnel Department, Lee Ha-young, said, "Wow, isn't this amazing?" and was answered with, "Wow, isn't this a relief?" Not understanding the question's meaning, the girl standing behind me asked what exactly you were talking about, and she replied, "I mean that." Looking back at Lim Ga-young, a member of the Divergent Guild and Lee Ha-young's bodyguard, isn't it nice that this person wasn't drafted in the same group as you? Having also reviewed the leaderboard that emerged after the battle in the Bronze League, the manager of the 3rd HR department added that you could have been eliminated from the game even without taking 2nd place. As she continued to press her body against the guards, Lee Ha-young wondered if it would be a good idea to prevent a fight if we suddenly met this person. Seeing that her subject looked away, showing her dissatisfaction, the woman sighed and thought, "Oh my God," like a child, and then said, "No way my Ga-yun will lose. Just face him in battle and show him who's in charge." In response to her boss's words, the bodyguard replied, "Everything is fine, my lady. I will avoid a fight." To which she replied, "No, this is an order. We need to collect data, so fight." In response to Lee Ha-young's words, the subject bowed her head to the woman and said humbly, "If you say so, then I will undoubtedly fulfill your order." As soon as the management headed for the exit, Lim Ga-yun turned her attention to the screen where the boy was fighting, and Sung Ji-han said thoughtfully, continuing to watch the recording of the battle between the boy and the man in armor, she added, "I could have sworn I've seen him somewhere before." Lim Ga-young is a girl who is a member of the Divergent Guild, and is currently the bodyguard of Lee Ha-young. She is also a famous S-ranked gift holder and a very promising hunter that the Divergent Guild ambitiously promoted to the masses in an attempt to make her famous. She lived up to the expectations of all the league participants, and everything would have been just fine if not for one thing. She could not take 1st place in the Bronze League. All of this happened because of one person. If not for the appearance of Sun Ji-han, who was looking at the leaderboard to find out the name of that strange guy, one man shouted it out for real. Holding a tablet in his hands, a Turtle Guild's scouting team member added that he was in 1st place despite being the 2nd level and not affiliated with the guilds. In addition, he had no equipment. While standing next to him, a warrior from the competition said to the archer, "When are we going to eat?" She replied with a facepalm, "Shut up already." Continuing to vent his emotions, the scout added that he made 6 laps in worn-out clothes and sweatpants, which is the same as entering the arena with nothing. Is he only on the 2nd level? Looking at the last footage of the competition, where this same guy was standing in the arena, a member of the scouting group added with concern and wondered who he was. While all the big corporations were nervous about one powerful player's emergence, Sung-ji sat on the couch after the battle, looking at the system notification that said you had 1st placed in the tutorial. You will receive a 50% increase in experience points as a reward. You leveled up 3 times from the 3rd to the 6th level. Seeing this, the guy happily said the leveling up is fast, as expected from low levels. The next moment, he was notified that the tutorial did not award equipment points. Seeing this, he mentally said, "First, I must invest all 3 points in combat power," and then received a notification that his combat power had increased from 6 to 9. Immediately after, I noticed a plaque with another award for the victory, and Ji-han added the nickname I won in the league. Right before him was a sign that said the bronze nickname for the one who won the tutorial. These characteristics plus 1 point of experience plus 20% are valid only in the Bronze League. After watching the tutorial, the guy said, "The one who won the tutorial is valid only in the Bronze League, but it's still lovely." Immediately after opening his status window to view the stats, he asked if all the characteristics increased by 1 from this nickname. Looking at the main characteristic that interested him the most, the guy happily added that the Bronze League would be easy with 10 points of combat power. As he continued to consider his next move, Ji-han mentally said, "The Silver League starts at level 25, and I just need to concentrate on getting stronger." The next moment, paying attention to the empty class ribbon, the boy confidently exclaimed, "That's it. I still have time to get a grade." Obtaining a class is a rather critical moment in every player's life. You must take it seriously and deliberately if you don't have it yet. There are only 4 types of classes. The first is a warrior, the second is an archer, the third is a wizard, and the fourth is a support player. In his past life, Song Ji-han chose the warrior class. Thinking about what class he should choose, the boy thought, I have already felt the power of a warrior once, and if I choose it, it will be much easier for me to advance, he said. After the regression, I got an achievement store that allows me to add a warrior class whenever I want, even if I choose another class. With a sly smile, the guy added, Now I don't have to choose a warrior class. Isn't that incredible? The next moment, reaching for his hand and the list of classes to choose the one he would like to try out, Ji-san confidently added, How good the class I want to choose this time will be. After a while, when the competition started again, the participants received a system notification that said, Welcome to the Kanama Bronze League. This time, the task of the Bronze League was defense, and with these system notifications, all players moved to the towers and the walls. A crowd of dead gathered in front of them, from which they had to defend themselves. Once at their initial test locations, all players received notifications that their main task was to protect the crystal and survive the onslaught of zombies. This battle will continue until only 5 towers are left with players and intact crystals on them. One of these towers was occupied by Lim Ga-yoon, a member of the Divergent Guild, and the 23rd ranked guild member. Looking around before the battle began, the girl said in her head, Even if it is considered a game. Looking at the crowd of disgusting zombies heading for the crystal towers, she added with displeasure that it was a rather disgusting sight. The next moment, 2 beams of light appeared behind her, which meant only one thing to her. 2 more players were called to the team to help with the defense quest. These 2 assistants were 2 boys, one a wizard and the other an archer. Seeing where they were thrown after joining the competition in the bronze target, the archer said in disappointment that of all the cards, this was the one to which the mage replied about defense. At the same time, looking at her allies, Lim Ga-yoon mentally said, The people I have to do the mission with this time have B-ranked archer equipment and are affiliated with the LK Guild. Turning her gaze to one of her comrades who had joined her team, she added mentally, The wizard seems to be unconnected to anyone and has excellent equipment. Having also evaluated the equipment of another ally, the girl confidently said it was pretty good. The next moment she looked up, where another bright beam of light appeared and added the most important team member to this map. Looking at the appearance of the last team member, who had just appeared in front of them when the beam of light hit the tower, Lim Ga-yoon mentally added a support player. She mentally added defense to shield herself from the dust that kicked up when the last player appeared. This is ultimately a battle of attrition, and the help of a support player is essential. As the beam of light dissipated, the girl plunged into a stupor when she saw who Lim Ga-yoon was, and she said something in confusion. Looking at the image of the guy who had just appeared before her, she added, It's him. At that very moment, Sun Ji-han, who was on the battlefield in defense mode, looked at his teammates' surprised eyes and asked what was going on. When he saw that he was not the only team member, he was disappointed to hear that the defense was not doing well. And now, let's go back 20 minutes. After selecting the support class, Sun Ji received a system notification that said, You have selected a support class. The warning class does not match the player. Are you sure you want to select the support class? Looking at the system notification that said, Do you really want to choose a support class? Ji-han said confidently, poking his finger at the confirmation button. Confirming his choice, the guy mentally said, There is only one reason why I chose the supporta class, even though the system is trying to talk me out of it. Immediately after turning your gaze to the system notification, you saw that you had completed the class, and that a support class had been added to his profile. After obtaining this class, Songji mentally spoke, recalling the reason for choosing the characteristic of divine power that opens after selecting the support class, which is the key component that must be developed to unlock a new, unique characteristic. But it was quite a difficult task to improve this characteristic. It is also difficult to increase it through training, and like other available characteristics, the only solution is to invest the remaining points in it. Song Ji-han has received a nameless divine art. Now he just invests all the points in combat power, remembering where he spends points per level. The guy thinks I can't spend these precious free points. After he had used some tricks to improve his position and achieve the goal more easily, the guy smiled slyly and said, I know another win-win method. After moving to the battlefield as a support player, He confidently added a skill others knew little about. At the same time, looking at the last player to join their team, Lim Ga-yun thought he was a sapper. When the sorcerer saw who had arrived as a supporter, he put his hand on his forehead and exclaimed, "Oh damn, he's driving me crazy. That's why I had no desire to participate in the tournament season." The next moment, pointing a finger in the guy's direction, he exclaimed, "Just look at his gear. Are you a bum? Do you really think I bought expensive gear to carry losers like you?" In response to these loud exclamations, the archer who stood beside him, trying to calm the magician, said, "I think you're going a little overboard. Please calm down." In response to the request, the magician, having beaten his friend's hand away so he would not touch his equipment, exclaimed, "Let me go. And you say this seeing this mistake of nature." Continuing to express his dissatisfaction, the guy exclaimed, "Damn it, let me go. Leave me alone. I have no desire to participate in this." Hearing this, Lim Ga-yun closed her eyes and thought how noisy they were, and it would be a difficult task to be paired with a troll like him. The next moment she heard the magician shouting again, "Let go of me!" But now she opened her eyes and saw that Sungji had taken him by the collar and lifted him into the air. Not realizing what was happening, she froze in place in confusion without interfering while the wizard continued to shout. "I said, 'Let go of me, bastard.'" After hearing his friend's wishes, Jihan said in a submissive voice, "As you wish." Upon hearing this answer, the wizard exclaimed in surprise. The next moment, Sungji let go of the boy after he swung and threw him into the crowd of zombies outside the wall. Realizing what had just happened to him, the mage flew down amidst frantic screams. While educating Sungji, he used his martial power. He threw the boy towards the monsters, freezing in that laughing pose while the other players looked toward the magician. A few seconds later, he was downstairs in the arms of zombies, for whom this treat was very appropriate. They even stepped back from the walls to enjoy the gift. At the same time after the throw, Jihan, adjusting his clothes, confidently said that if you don't want to participate, just don't play, and there are still some questions. Throwing his steel pipe over his shoulder, the boy added confidently, "I can do just fine without you." After being thrown out of the tower several times, the wizard fell to his knees and began to bow before Jihan, scared, and exclaimed, "I will try harder." This guy's name is Kim Gyu-hyuk. He was a magician on this team. By now, having realized his mistake, he was begging for mercy on his knees in front of the sapper. He scaredly exclaimed, "Haven't you already killed me enough times?" And the reason for the dramatic change in the infusion and views on the life of this troublemaker was quite simple. In the Bronze League, in a defense mission, all participants are given 3 rights to make a mistake, or, in other words, to live. After Song Jihan threw Kim Gyu-hyuk outside the tower and he died, he immediately worked on the tower. Still, after being revived, he had only 1 life left. Afterward, Seong-ji saw that he had reappeared on the tower and threw him down again, saying, "Oh right, you can be reborn right here," which was the loss of the magician's second life. When the team's wizard died for the second time, he had only 1 life left, and if he passed 1 more time, he would lose his last life. After the second rebirth, looking at the behavior of the impudent boy, Jihan was surprised to hear why you suddenly decided to change so drastically, and he bowed his head and replied that from now on, I would be executed with all my might. Bending his head down in front of Sung Jin, Kim Hyo-hyun thought frightenedly, "I can't take last place. If I bend first, my level will be lowered because of the penalty. And the skill that I spent so much money on will simply disappear if the player's level drops, and he cannot fulfill the minimum requirements. His skill will disappear after hearing the prayers." Jihan asked in surprise, "Didn't you change your mind too quickly?" Recalling what he did after his first revival, Jihan added, "Try to use your skill as before." Then, Kim Ji-wyu-hyun, using the fireball skill, shouted out, "Stay away from me, fire! Here you go!" However, his magic spells had no effect on Jihan, who repelled all his attacks. He approached the magician and said menacingly, "Your fire was not bad." After receiving praise from his ally in this battle, Kim Ji-wyu-hyun nervously said, "Yes, the fire is correct." Looking down from where they had been climbing to destroy the crystal, and at the same time, their wizard, the fire mages, were the most valuable on these cards. Having demonstrated his ability to control fire, he confidently added, "I am the one who is currently at level 15. Turning his gaze to Lim Ga-yun standing behind the boy, the wizard added, "You don't want to lose the most valuable fighter in this mission." In response, the girl gritted her teeth and sighed, then thought, "I wondered where I had seen him before." Looking again at the mage in front of her, Lim Ga-yoon added in her head that Kim Gyu-hyuk used to be a mage who belonged to one of the top 10 guilds. But he failed to reach the silver level 4 times. He became the one who started fights with others out of nothing. The last time he became the center of ridicule of his comrades, he set fire to all the players and angrily shouted, "Just die, damn it!" After these speculations about the origin of this noisy magician, Lim Ga-yoon mentally added, "In short, just a piece of trash." The next moment, having been informed of his value in this survival, Kim Gyu-hyun said offensively, "But I have one condition." Pointing a finger at Song Ji-han, he added, "I'm sorry you threw me out. If you do that, then I'll participate." Hearing his friend's demand, the archer joyfully exclaimed, "Wow, you've come up with a good idea. Let's try our best now." After putting forward his conditions for the team battle against the monsters, Kim Gyu-hyuk angrily said in his head, "Damned rascal. Just wait a little longer. Next time, I'll see you," he said. And as soon as he thought about it, he felt himself being grabbed by the collar and lifted off the ground again. At the same time, the wizard said in confusion that he did not understand, and the archer's joy suddenly disappeared. After preparing for the next lesson, Jihan smiled slyly and said, "Hey, do you really want me to apologize to you like that?" Realizing what was about to happen, the wizard shouted in confusion, "Wait!" and then felt himself thrown into the air. Songji said, waving his hand and sending the magician flying above him, "People can really think." Swinging his steel stick to deflect the target into the air, he added that I had started the fight. The next moment, after hitting the sorcerer and sending him to the monsters, everyone witnessed Kim Gyu-hyuk flying down again, screaming in fright. After cleaning up the problem that had started to make its own rules here, Sung Ji-han confidently said, "Well, get out of here if you don't want to help." Watching the flight of the home run, he added insultingly, "Next time, you will learn that you need to behave more politely with other people." At that very moment, the archer who had witnessed one of their comrades just lose all his life standing there like a man dug in, said in confusion, and he really finished him off. After the system notified that Kim Gyu-hyuk was dead, the zombies had almost reached the top of the tower and were only a few meters away. At the same time, watching the other participants cope with this task, they heard exclamations, as expected from a fire mage. "What an impressive destructive power. If we continue at the same pace, we will not be the last. Let's go and toast some marshmallows." After showing how the other players move with the offensive, the archer said unhappily, "That's why we needed a wizard. What are you going to do now?" He continued complaining, "It would be great if we met a fire mage and asked him for help so we didn't have to kill him so quickly." At the same time, upon hearing the notification sound, Songji opened the system window and saw the limited task of taking first place out of 10 towers with a reward of 1,000 achievement points. Immediately after, another system notification appeared above him, informing him that a task chain had appeared. The guy said in surprise that it was a task chain. When he found this chain, he saw the source of the zombies' destruction. 1,000 zombies alone rewarded 3,000 achievement points. Seeing the requirements, the guy was surprised to say that 1,000 himself, and then mentally added this quest is impossible to complete due to the time limit. Immediately after taking a pensive pose, he thought, if only the reward for it was too great to give up. At the same time standing aside and watching the guy, Lim Ga-yoon just silently condemned Song Ji-han, saying in her head, "He's the worst person I've ever met." Turning her head away from the boy, she mentally added that if you don't consider that he did as he pleased, with such characteristics, he chose to be a cheerleader. Even those who just decided to have fun are not like that. Focusing her attention on Sung Ji-han again, she thought, he's not worth recruiting to the Divergent. At the same time, continuing to express his dissatisfaction, the archer angrily shouted, "Hey, say something! Why are you ignoring me? If you're going to continue to behave like this, why don't you fight yourself?" Hearing the proposal from his ally in this survival, Ji-han was surprised to hear that I could do it. Hearing the request to fight alone, the archer exclaimed in confusion. At the same moment, concentrating on his thoughts, Sungji thought that maybe he could complete the quest if he monopolized all the zombies. As the enemies approached the top of the tower, Lim Ga-yoon took her sword out of its sheath and said, "I'll be in the front line, Mr. Report. Stay behind." She then thought, this game is spoiled, but as a player, I have to accept. Before she could finish her thought, she heard the support player say, "Don't worry, everything is fine." Not realizing what he had just said, the girl confusedly replied, "What do you mean?" To which he replied, "I've already told you everything. I'll deal with them all myself." Continuing to talk about how everything was under control, Sung Ji said that's why Miss Warrior would protect Mr. Archer, to which the guy behind him responded confusedly. But the finger-pointing was not just surprise or displeasure. The archer pointed at the enemy who had already climbed the tower and screamed in fright at the same bloody zombie. Grabbing his weapon with Lim Ga-yun, the archer exclaimed that he was different from ordinary zombies. His entire body was liquid, so you couldn't finish him off with physical attacks. Bites. After assessing the enemy who first appeared to them, the archer scaredly exclaimed, "This is an evil opponent for us." At the same time, Song-ji ignored any comments from his comrades and went into battle against his first opponent, of whom he had to defeat 1,000. As soon as he struck the enemy with the whole stick, the zombie immediately broke into small pieces that burned with bright flames. Witnessing this miracle, the girl exclaimed in confusion, "What the hell?" Looking at the color of the flames that enveloped every part of the body of the enemy they had just defeated, Lim Ga-yun confusedly added another sacred flame. Immediately after turning her gaze to the guy who had accomplished something impossible, she said in amazement that it was divine power. The next moment, Sung Ji-han was on a rampage, and all the enemies who climbed the tower immediately faced him and were instantly defeated in the battle. At the same time, the boy, waving his steel stick, said mentally, "I have no idea whether I will be able to do it, but I have to try." Preparing for a long struggle to complete the chain of tasks, he expected enemies that continued to rise and added that I should at least try. Continuing to destroy enemies, the guy received system notifications indicating progress. The last notification reported a chain of quests that destroyed 6 out of 1,000 zombies. A few seconds later, the statistics updated when more enemies climbed the tower, and he dealt with them. The alert said the chain of tasks destroyed 12 zombies out of 1,000. Progress rapidly increased as the monsters continued to frantically influx, and the 17th and 18th system alerts destroyed 19 zombies out of 1,000. 26 out of 1,000 zombies were destroyed. When the progress was filled by 2 6/10%, the enemies began to advance even more intensely, eager to eat meat. At the same time, Sung-ji paused for a second, while the enemies were reaching the top, and mentally said, "Physical attacks don't work on bloody zombies. Only when I want them to, I release my divine power drop by drop." Again, noticing one bloody zombie that appeared in his field of vision, Ji-han, sticking to his tactics, added in his head and destroyed them in one fell swoop. At the same time looking at their teammates soloing to deal with the invasion of enemies, the archer exclaimed in confusion, "This support player is fantastic. He's just crazy." Switching his anger to joy, the guy confidently added, "Well, if he is a master of this level, it doesn't matter if he's a little rude. Good for you." At the same time, watching Sung Jin's fight, Lim Ga-yun nervously thought that he fights freely with his divine power without wasting a single drop of it. Such control is simply absurd. Continuing to express her surprise without saying a word out loud, the girl added, "The main thing that surprises me in this situation is that this person is a man." Continuing to observe the boy's weapon skills, Lim Ga-yun mentally said he kept hitting the enemy's heads precisely. After a specific time, when the bar for destroying monsters reached 21%, or 210 out of 1,000 people, the guy kept the system alerted that the conditions were met. After experiencing the effect of the restoration, Ji-han received another system notification. You fully understood the faith of the other world, and your divine power increased from 6 to 7. After increasing his characteristics, the guy smiled slyly and happily said, "I know another way to increase divine power." Waving his stick and preparing to continue confronting the monsters, he confidently said, "Well, let's continue in the same spirit." After these words, the man felt a new influx of divine energy and joyfully declared that it really worked. Imagining the priest's headdress and some other things belonging to the church, he mentally said that divine objects are sacred. In 2011, when the studies at Zelia had just begun, they were sold at relatively high prices, justifying this because these subjects contain some secrets. However, 10 years later, none of them were opened, which is why the value of the objects gradually decreased, especially the divine ones. Another way to put it is that a large proportion of people do not even realize that such objects exist in this world. Priestess Sophia, a top 3 player in the American Leaders Guild, said confidently as she prepared for training, "I have increased my divine power with an item from another world." Hearing the remark from his friend, with whom he had been good friends in his past life, Sung Ji-han said in surprise, "What are you talking about?" The branch of the American Leaders Guild in the United States, continuing her conversation with the boy, Sophia, said that divine power can be strengthened by a sacred object from another world. However, after the training conversion, it did not work, which she heard in a surprised voice in response. After her friend's surprise, the priestess approached him and said, "Of course, that's how I became a priestess." Recalling her path to achieving this title, she added that if you hold it and pray for a long time, you will receive divine power. However, the conditions differ slightly from subject to subject. When he heard about the strange way of obtaining divine power, Songji held his head and said, "I can't believe that no one knows about such an easy way." He said, "There's nothing to be done. Even if there are rumors about it, such items are incredibly hard to find." Hearing some remarks about this method, Ji-han believed that it was true, and that it would work only during training. He then said, "Thanks to this, you could monopolize all divine objects." Hearing a certain statement from her friend, Sophia thought about the idea and replied, "Well, that's not entirely true." After mentioning valuable information, the boy mentally said valuable information that almost no one knows. Continuing her thought, the girl added, "Someone else is constantly collecting divine items." After this remark, Songji thought another player also possessed it. After returning in time and visiting the Sword King's penthouse, the boy saw many divine objects before him and said the same thing in his head. Looking at the no longer usable artifacts, he mentally added all the divine objects. Their power was drained, so they were empty. Directly in front of him were the divine objects of the other world. Holy Grail status, deactivated divine object of the other world. Cross status, deactivated divine object of the other world. Medallion status, deactivated. Seeing all the different unnecessary things here, Sung Ji-han wondered if this was really the point. Thinking about why they were all completely devastated, Sung Ji thought, "I know only one priestess who collected these items." My older sister Song Ji-ah added, recalling the picture of the Sword King Ji-han family before her eyes. Immersed in memories of when his sister was still alive, he mentally added that, along with Yoon Se-jin, she was Korea's best cheerleader and heroine. Not wanting to remember precisely what happened to Seong Jae, he put on his shirt and walked out of the room, saying in his head that her death was a long story. On his way out, he noticed the divine power of the other world and added it to the items she had left behind. Concentrating on what would help him in the battle against his enemies, he mentally said, "I could only find a steel staff." Taking the artifact in his hands, he saw the description of the steel staff that appeared, rank E, a divine object of another world. The priests of another world strengthened their faith in God by hitting members of their cult on the head with it. After rereading the description, he mentally said, "I can see that from the description." Having finished remembering his past and returned to reality, where he passed the survival test on the tower against the monsters, Sungji confidently added that they needed to smash the heads of zombies. Noticing some effect after a couple of hundred destroyed monsters, the guy mentally said the rank of the item had increased. It will be able to draw in quite a bit of divine power, but its weight is just perfect for strikes. At the same time, watching the battle, Lim Ga-yoon froze in place and thought, he has incredible physical training, but how is it possible to keep control so well? Then he heard an exclamation of, "Wow, it's amazing." Immediately after, the archer pointed to a neighboring tower and said, "But the warrior over there, the tower fell." They were highly praised and placed in the top 5. Continuing to rejoice that they were still holding on thanks to their sport, the archer ignored the zombie approaching him and shouted that he could join the fight. Deciding not to wait for something terrible, the girl reacted sharply to the enemy's attack. She quickly dealt with him with a few swings of her sword, thus saving her ally. Noticing the strange behavior of the girl acting strangely, Ji-han wondered what had suddenly happened to her and looked familiar. Looking at the profile of the girl who held the position of a warrior in their team, Sung-ji said, in surprise, "It's the Plum Blossom Sword Lim Ga-yoon. It's her, no mistake." While he was thinking, the boy knocked the monster out of his fist as he continued to repel the monsters that were coming at him. He thought, she was famous for being the Sword King for a time, but she had a sad ending. Recalling a moment from his past life, Ji-han mentally added, "She died at the hands of Yoon Se-jin Niruke, and I had to save her once." The next moment, interrupting the guy's thoughts, the girl howled, riveting his attention to herself. "Hey, support player, can you hear me?" To which he replied, "Yes, there is a quality problem." In response, looking at the guy who was doing all the work himself, Lim Ga-yoon replied, "You won't mind our help if we join. Our team will take the place of the nickname." After hearing the girl's proposal, Sung Ji-han hurried to review his statistics by opening the status window and finding the task's progress. Looking at the leaderboard in which they took 5th place, Ji-han mentally said, "We are in 5th place," having completed 398 laps, and then looked at the progress of his task, in which there was one less monster and added a lot more left. After that, looking at the countdown timer, which said 1 minute and 28 seconds left, he added it, and we had very little time left. Upon completing the situation assessment, with progress and time available, Ji-han turned his gaze to the warrior girl and thought the plum blossom sword would do fine without me, after which the archer exclaimed that we had a simply unbeatable team. After assessing the situation in this defense task and his comrades, who were also quite strong, he confidently said, "Everything seems to be okay." The next moment, he jumped up and headed for the edge of the tower, exclaiming, "Go on, I'll leave them to you." Upon completing the transfer of authority to protect the crystal, Ji-han jumped from the tower in the direction of the crowd of zombies to quickly accumulate kills. At the same time, when the comrades heard about the renewal of their duties, they turned their attention to the boy, saw Ji-han's crazy decision, and were speechless. Seeing that the man had reached the bottom, some zombies climbing the tower decided to follow him and jumped off the building. At the same time, his comrades continued to stand in shock. Having prepared for a quick farm, Sung-ji said, "I'll gather everyone who's still left and prepare my steel staff for a massive attack." Landing on a crowd of enemies who began to gather at the place of his landing, the boy used a burst of divine power and spoke in his head and tore them all to pieces. When the archer saw what had just happened from the top of the tower, he was shocked and said, "Wow, I'm still confused." The next moment after the powerful explosion, the overall ranking was sharply updated, and Ji-han's team climbed to the first stage. After which, the archer shouted, "God, we are the first." After a short time, another system notification appeared saying, "You are the last survivors." After this notification, Sung-ji received another system notification saying that you had completed the limited task of first placing among the 10 towers. After completing the task, he exhaled a disappointed breath and said what he expected. After that, he said thoughtfully, "I wonder how many I managed to destroy." Opening the task progress, he saw interconnected tasks to destroy 560 zombies out of 1,000, and then a notification appeared that the game was over. Moving back to the top of the tower after completing the task, Sung-ji heard an archer run up to him and then happily shouted out to support him, "Thank you for your efforts. You were just incredible." Ignoring my teammate, who was happily shouting, "Thank you for pulling us out. I thought I should try again if I was already stronger." Continuing to ignore the noisy guy, he added in frustration in his head, "However, it was unlikely that such a task would happen again." Looking outside the tower to see what had happened after Ji-han landed, she heard the archer shout, "Let's be on the same team next time too." Seeing the consequences that Ji-han caused in the arena with his own power, Lim Ga-yoon was shocked to think that this was nonsense and that an independent player could do this on his own. Observing the cracked ground and crater left by his landing, she mentally added, "Especially since the support was below my level, it must be a mistake." The archer, who had already said everything he wanted to say, interrupted Lim Ga-yoon's thoughts the next moment, saying, "Well then, I'll be going now." Immediately after saying goodbye, a system notification appeared, and your ally left. Then, he buttoned up his jacket, and Sung-ji mentally added, "I also need to get out to get the reward." Before he could leave the tower defense location, he suddenly heard his name called out by a girl who wanted to detain him, Sung Ji-han. Looking at the girl who looked like she was worried about something, Ji-han was surprised to hear the plum blossom sword in his head. The next moment, he asked me how I knew and then mentally added that there was no way in hell we could have met anywhere before. How does she know me? At the same time, standing next to the boy, Lim Ga-yoon, trying to collect her thoughts, said to herself, "I need to talk to him." Gathering her thoughts and gaining courage, the girl looked at her ally and confidently said in her head, "A person with such potential and achievements is needed for the guild to divert." Continuing her thought, she added that I, as a guild member, must recruit him. And then, with a serious expression, she said, "Please give me your number." Immediately after she said that, realizing what she had just done and how it could have sounded from the outside, she said in confusion, "Stop what?" Panicking instantly, she took a step back and simultaneously turned her head to Lim Ga-yoon. Sung Ji-han said in surprise, "I'm sorry." Blushing with emotion, the girl said, "I'm sorry. I didn't mean it that way." Then, mentally replaying the situation, she tried to explain everything to him in order, and asking him for his number in the first conversation was not a good thing to do at the first meeting. Trying to justify herself somehow, the girl said nervously, "I am a member of the Divergent Guild." Continuing to recruit a new member for her guild, she added, "We would love to." Before she could finish her speech, the guy interrupted her with a confident, "I'm sorry." Continuing to get ready to return from this task, he added, "I don't remember my number." Hearing the refusal, the girl bowed her head in disappointment and wondered what had just happened. Poking around the profile in the system window to find the logout button, Sung Ji Han said finally, "As soon as we meet again, I'll give you my number. And now, bye." Immediately after these words, she received a system notification that said ally of the outgoing Lim Ga-yoon, and she mentally wondered how she could not remember her phone number. Immediately after the rejection, the girl began to overthink. Surprised, she said, "Did he really reject me in such a way?" At the same time, once at home, Sung-ji thought, "I used to use an American number. But what was my Korean number?" Walking down the street, a guy trying to remember his phone number thoughtfully said in his head, "You can't ask someone else about this." Immediately after discussing the problem he was facing, the guy looked up and thoughtfully said, "By the way, I just got accepted into the guild." Continuing on his way, he mentally added that I seemed to stand out among all the others. Then he accidentally heard some noise from the banner and looked up to see an announcement that said he was joining the guild. Realizing what had just happened, he added, "Actually, I could ask for her number, but I don't want to join any guilds yet." Having finished thinking about team play with other players, the guy opened his system profile window and said, "For now, my priority remains team play." Looking at his status window, the guy said, "So, I raised my level by 2, and now I'm at the 8th level, and I managed to earn 1,500 points of equipment." Reflecting on the results of the recent task, he thoughtfully added, "Not bad, especially since I have increased my divine power." The next moment, having opened an equipment store where all the items cost at least 3,000, I disappointedly said in my head that I would not have enough money for any of them. Disappointed with the prices in the equipment store, the guy turned back and thought it was cheaper in the 20s. As he approached the King of Swords penthouse where he lived, he thought, "I'll go home and rummage through my sister's basement again, see if I can find something useful." Using the elevator, the guy pressed the button and waited for the elevator to go down to the system's message that the doors were closing. After activating the elevator, Sung Ji Han reached the desired floor. He opened the door to enter when he suddenly saw something unusual in his house. Someone's shoe was right in front of him on the doorstep, and when he noticed it, the guy exclaimed in confusion. Throwing his bag of groceries on the floor, the guy seemed to be off the chain and quickly ran inside to see the guest who came to him. As he walked toward the door, he thought, "Everyone has a moment in their life that they regret, and I have regretted many moments in my past life." As he reached for the doorknob, he thought, "Really?" He opened the door and began to walk inside slowly. He mentally said, not believing that this moment had really come. But my main reason for regret was that when he saw the girl he valued so much and wanted to protect from the future, he thought, "I could not protect you." Hearing the creak of the door, which meant that the owner had already returned, the girl looked back and said, "Wow, I'm surprised that you're already awake and went outside." Continuing the conversation with the guy, the guest added, "Well, how about your hangover at that very moment?" Being completely in his thoughts, Sungji mentally added, "I wanted to tell you so much when we met." Recalling the moments when he was overcome by stress and started drinking heavily, she was the only one who tried to comfort and reassure him, telling him over and over again that everything would be fine. In response to his niece's words, Sung Ji Han bowed his head down and continued drinking, saying, "Sia, you're pretty strong." Hearing her uncle's praise, the girl confidently replied, "Yes, I am," and then tried to continue to dissuade him from sinking into depression and drinking. Trying to take the bottle of alcohol away from her uncle so that he would stop drinking, the girl said, "From now on, I will protect you." Remembering this moment, Sungji thought, "Thank you for protecting me." Recalling the moment when she made him a promise and tried to encourage him by pretending to be strong, she said, "Just believe in me." Also, recalling the moment when he had to lose the only person who appreciated him and did not leave him in trouble no matter what, Ji Han mentally added, "I'm sorry I couldn't protect you." Continuing to recall those feelings of profound loss when he held his only family member in his arms without signs of life, the guy said, "I know it may sound shameless." Looking at his niece, who was alive then, and hearing her gentle voice, he said, "Why don't you answer quickly? Go and wash your hands," and thought, "I really missed you so much." Smiling happily after coming to see her only family member after being left alone in Korea, the girl happily told her uncle. Trying to somehow hold back his tears after what happened to him after the loss and the new meeting when he returned in time, Sia said in a low voice. Looking at the girl standing before him, the boy mentally said, "This year she turns 18. She is the daughter of Yoon Se-jin and my older sister, my niece." The next moment, after recalling all the information about his niece, the boy smiled happily. He asked if the night in Jeju had already ended like that. In response to her uncle's question, the girl put her hand behind her head and laughed nervously, saying, "Well, I just went to report a little earlier." After hearing from his niece, Sung Ji-han thought Sia was born when my sister worked to provide for us, and that's why I looked after her since she was a baby. Then I heard everyone was completely crazy about her father. Awkwardly scratching her cheek, she added, "It's just the two of us at home now." Sung-ji mentally added, "For me, who lost his family at an early age, he's the most critical person in the world. She's my family." After these mentions, the boy grabbed his face and said irritatedly, "Damn, Yoon," and then he added, "It's okay, you called your father." In response to her uncle's question, the girl hid her gaze and nervously answered yes, but heard what? In response to her uncle's question, the girl said confusedly, "Well, the thing is that he fell in love," and then began to tell about a phone conversation in which her father said, "Just know that it will be like this from now on." Upon hearing her father's message, the girl nervously exclaimed, "What are you talking about? How can you suddenly fall in love? Are you crazy?" She then heard me say, "I don't expect you to understand," and Xia added, "What are you going to tell me to do? You're going to leave me alone." After his daughter asked, Ryuhei replied that this was the woman's condition in exchange for her love. When she heard the demand, the girl sitting in the toilet stall asked in confusion, "So you agreed to such an absurdity?" After receiving a question from his daughter, the man replied, "Well, it's time for me to find out the truth about how his niece was abandoned," and gritted his teeth and said in his head, "What a bastard." A little angry, he sighed heavily, resigned to what had happened. Drawing Sia's attention to himself, he thought, well, he's always been like that. Recalling the same broken picture of the man who irritated him, Ji-han mentally said he left his daughter and country for some woman. Feeling his anger begin to overwhelm him, the boy mentally added the innocent C because of him, and at the same time, the girl looked back at the wall where the portrait hung. Seeing that it was now in a damaged state, she asked Uncle, "Did you break the portrait?" Hearing Ji-han's question, he thought, "Oh shit." Suddenly, coming to his senses and pulling himself from his anger, he nervously said, "I'm sorry, I got angry and didn't realize how." Immediately after the acquittal, realizing the circumstances of the situation, he mentally said, "Well, this is really too much. No matter how angry I am, he's still her father." Turning her gaze back to the broken portrait of her father, the girl asked why she broke it. Raising her fist and smiling happily, the girl said, trying to hide her despair, "I wanted to do it myself." Seeing her uncle's confusion, who froze in his tracks after hearing this, her niece added, "Don't worry, everything is fine with me." After hearing what the last of his family members had just told him, Sung Ji-han confidently said, "Yes, that's the kind of person she is." Recalling the life situation of his niece, the boy added to his mind that her mother was dead and her father had cheated on her and left her. As he continued to think about what was happening, he said, "But even so, she won't stop smiling about me. Seiya is more concerned about me than about herself." Immediately after heading to his niece, Sung Ji-han confidently thought, "You don't have to be like that anymore." Stretching his hand to her and smiling gently, he added in his mind from that moment. Holding the girl's head to his chest, the boy smiled happily and said, "Sia, you've grown up." Taking on the role of guardian, he added, "You even know how to take care of your uncle." Hearing this, the girl said something confused. Continuing to act as an adult who now takes on the responsibility of protecting and caring for himself, Sung-ji added, "All right, from now on, I will protect you. From now on, you don't have to work so hard." Hearing these words from her uncle, the girl closed her eyes and finally relaxed. The girl accepted her new role and said, "Thank you very much, Uncle." Immediately after the sentimental conversations with her family, the girl spoke up and heard some remarks. Ji-han asked, surprised, what had happened. The next moment after her uncle's question, the girl added, "You smell like sweat." The boy nervously exclaimed, "Oh, I'm sorry." At the same time, somewhere in the Gangnam district of Seoul, The main building where the guild called Divergent was located. Walking next to her client, Lim Ga-yoon said in a disgruntled, irritated tone, "You can't hold back your laughter, ma'am." The latter replied, "No, I'm sorry." Then the bodyguard added, "Just laugh." Having received permission to laugh, Lee Ha-young began to laugh out loud, attracting the attention of everyone in the corridor, and then said, "Oh, I'm sorry, Ga-young." Having fully expressed her emotions, the girl wiped her tears after laughing and said, "The guy is quite busy." Turning his gaze to his subject, who was a little offended, Lee Ha-young added, Big Ga-young asked for his phone number, and he refused. Continuing to mock her subject, she added that she did not remember him, which was something new. In response to this, she heard, "I am powerless. They say when you first approach someone, you are judged by your appearance. I am not as beautiful as you, and I look more like a man." Hearing her subject's reflections, who was very much underestimating herself, the woman looked at her with a stern look and thought that this was a problem. The next moment, looking back at the employees, she mentally added, "She doesn't even realize how popular she is." At the same time, behind their backs, one man asked another if this plum blossom sword Ga-yoon could ask her out on a date, to which he heard her reply, "I'll cut you in half." Deciding not to personally take on the baggage of the duty of persuasion, Lee Ha-young shrugged and said, "Go ask people's opinions about you. They will convince you." After a while, when she arrived in the break room, the woman picked up a cup of coffee and said, "Oh, I feel most relaxed here." Then Ga-young asked her what she planned to do about hiring Sung-jin. In response to the question, the bodyguard said, "I plan to convince him at any cost. The old men are insisting on settling everything as soon as possible, and this situation depresses me. He is quite talented and should become one of us." The next moment, Lee Ha-young noticed one person in the live broadcast and exclaimed in surprise at why he suddenly went on the air today. There were no large-scale battles. Then he heard Miss Yu are still watching gambling broadcasts. In response to her subject's question, the girl said that in the sense of gambling, they just analyze strategies here, after which Ga-yoon asked in surprise. The next moment, when she saw whose stream was displayed on the main screen, Lim Ga-yoon said something confused to the lady, and then she exclaimed, "What?" Also identifying the person who was streaming, Lee Ha-yeon told Sung Ji-han that at the same time, the guy had said Xia was working fine, to which she replied, "Yes." Everything is also visible on the phone. Recognizing the person on whose stream she had just entered, Miss Ga-yoon said unhappily, "That's him you're always looking at," and nervously replied, "That's not the point now." Drawing my subject's attention to the headline of the stream, which said, "I am the son-in-law of the king of the sword, Lee Ha-young," I added that he says he is the son-in-law of the king of the sword. At the same time, preparing to implement his plan, the man told Xia to stand a little further away, to which she replied confusedly that it was okay now. In the face of many comments from viewers who expressed their assumptions about this situation and the stream's name, Song-ji was preparing for a grand show. Raising his right foot, the boy suddenly stomped, after which the ground broke under him, and the crack went to the pedestal of the two swords. After seeing what happened on the stream, one of the viewers angrily wrote, "I'm crazy, and this is the same Korean landmark they are boasting about to foreigners." After the grand show started, Ji-han prepared for the climax without even knowing about the commentators. As the number of spectators grew steadily, the boy smashed his country's landmark to pieces with just one punch. At the same time, as soon as the pedestal was destroyed, he received a system notification that said the achievement was completed. Looking at the suit that had been torn apart, Sung-ji said, "I'm a little relieved." Having fulfilled a specific part of his plan to attract a large audience, the guy spoke about the citizenship of the Sword King Yoon Se-jin. So, in the world where the game appeared, there was also a certain platform for broadcasting battles, and it was called the BattleNet streaming platform. It was one of the few streaming platforms with no analogs or equal. Seeing the conditions for the achievement, the guy mentally said that since this platform is part of the BattleNet, the number of viewers, subscribers, and views will help me get rewards for achievements. After performing a grand show for Song Ji-han, the son-in-law of the Sword King, he will have no better chance to win all the rewards than this. The next moment, 2 system notifications appeared above him saying, "You have achieved the usual achievement of collecting viewers," and "You have achieved the usual achievement of collecting 100,000 dislikes." Looking at the considerable number of achievements that he managed to get, Sung-ji was surprised to hear a lot of dislikes in his head, as expected. and I didn't even think Seijin would ever be helpful. When I saw the comments of one of the viewers who wrote how you dared to destroy the statue of two swords, which symbolizes the king of the sword, and what if he doesn't want to come back because of this? I thought of a screensaver with two swords. Remembering a particular organization that he hated, the boy mentally added that it was definitely from the fandom of the Sword King, the club of rabid fans of Yoon Se-jin that drove Xia to his death. Thinking back to his past and how things had happened there, Xiongji mentally said these people were the ones who supported Yoon Se-jin the most, and that was why their discontent and anger grew over time. Over time, they began to head toward his only relative, Yoon Xia. At the same time, members of this group repeatedly repeated that the King of the Sword had left his country because of his naughty daughter. Starting to persecute the poor girl, they repeated Yoon Xia must die so that he will return, destroy her, and finish her and the rest after these events. Recalling what had happened to her niece, Jihan gritted his teeth and said in his head, they needed someone to blame and vent their anger on. However, this time, everything will be different. After what he did to the sword pedestal, standing in front of an audience of millions, the guy said, I hope you are all listening carefully to me now, and then thought, I would love to be a target for their emotions. Having riveted the audience's attention to himself, Jihan slammed his hand on the remaining swords that had not yet collapsed, and then received comments from the bastard. Stop asking us to listen to you. You are spoiling the property. After completing his grand show with the destruction of crossed swords, he confidently announced that Ito Ryuhei would never return. At the same time, there were heated discussions in the comments about whether or not this was Song Ji-han, the guy from the Bronze League training, who only has bronze, and what he is doing. Are you still sure he has bronze after he broke the statue? I don't care about the statue, but I think the idiots from the King of the Sword fan club are going crazy. The next moment, holding out his phone with the audio recording to the lens, Sunji said, I'll let you listen to the recording of this conversation that Ryuhei had with his daughter after he decided to take Japanese citizenship. The next moment, the general public witnessed a telephone conversation in which the daughter asked her father what was happening and why they were leaving so suddenly. He replied, I fell in love. After hearing her father's answer, Yoon Se-a exclaimed in surprise that it was all for her sake, and when she heard the reason for Ga-yoon's move, she growled, what a bastard. Continuing to play the audio recording, people heard the girl ask if he was going to leave me and leave me alone, to which he replied that after hearing this, the audience wrote that it was true. Everyone suddenly stopped writing to the chat. Finally, the last phrase from the audio recording was played for the general public. In it, the now King of the Sword, Ryuhei, said this condition to the woman in exchange for her love. After heated discussions in the chat room about the slander and disputing the words of the Sword King fan club members, a girl appeared in the lens. She said, Hello, I am Yoon Se-a, the daughter of the Sword King. Continuing her speech in front of an audience of millions, she added, I was also shocked by this situation, and I am here to tell you all something. After hearing that, my father left the Sword Palace to me, and several characters wrote in the comments that I was jealous of what kind of father he was. Just take care of yourself and forget about him, she added, however. Looking into the camera lens with confident eyes, the girl added, I just can't accept an inheritance from a person who has left his country and family. After that, continuing to follow her uncle's script, she added that this is why I inherited the building. I decided to pass it on to my country. After hearing this, commenters started writing that she was crazy. I didn't feel better about it and wished she had given it to me. After the grand announcement of the transfer of property to the state, Yoon Se-a added, I hope this donation will be a great help to the players in Korea. At the same time, Sung-ji, standing behind her, began to smile slyly, and she said, I will tell you the details of this case later. And now, let's go back 30 minutes to the conversation between the boy and her niece. When she heard the uncle's proposal, she exclaimed in confusion, You want me to donate the house? Starting to pull the guy's cheek to bring him to his senses, Yoon Se-a added, But you don't look drunk, to which he said, wiping his head after a shower. That hurt. Looking at Sung-ji with frightened eyes, the girl asked, Why do you want to give away everything we have? Are you crazy? Immediately after his answer, the guy turned his head and added, To be honest, I have little faith that I can convince her. But who would have succeeded, especially since I asked her not to sell the building to someone who had been saving money for it all his life, but simply to donate it. Then, pushing Se-a to make a decision, he said, Uncle, you're serious, he replied. Trust me." Continuing to press hard on the girl, the boy mentally said, "I need to convince her at all costs that Yoon Se-jin will completely destroy Korea as a representative of Japan." Recalling those comments from the live broadcast, Ji-han mentally added that the anger of Koreans was so great that the out-of-control government could not cope with their discontent, so it confiscated Yoon Se-jin's property. For the rest of us, after this incident, Yoon Se, who lost her home and a place to return to, could not withstand all the threats and persecution from the King of Swords fan club. Recalling the past, which had a rather tragic ending, what happened to her niece mentally added that this was why she took her own life. Continuing to pressure the girl to make a decision, Ji-san thought that if the house would be taken away anyway, it would be better to give it away and keep Sia safe. Closing his eyes while thinking, the boy nervously said in his head, "For her, I am nothing more than a freeloader and a drunk who stays at home all day. I can't tell her that I came from the future." Immediately after these thoughts, Sung-ji suddenly heard the girl say, "Well," after receiving an affirmative answer, and he said confusedly, "I didn't hear." Not understanding why she agreed so easily, the guy nervously asked her if she was sure she agreed to what. She turned away and replied why she was asking. "You insisted on it," and then he added, "But isn't it stupid?" In response to all the remarks of her only family member, the girl replied, "You're not the kind of person who would just ask for something like that without a reason, and most importantly." Looking back, smiling happily, the girl added confidently, "I haven't seen you so confident in a long time, uncle." Breathing out a sigh of relief after hearing what the girl said in front of the camera, Sung-ji wondered who she had turned into. Rejoicing that everything was going according to his plan, Sung-ji looked up at his niece and thought, "This is so incredible." Immediately after the announcement of the transfer of the building to the state, there were many comments like, "Miss Sia, you were deceived. This guy is a fraud. Song Ji-han is definitely the son-in-law of the King of the Sword. Maybe he is a spy from Japan." Looking at the reaction of the people who took the girl's side, the guy thought, "That's just fine. Keep attacking me. If that's the way it goes, then there will be no complaints against Sia." He just needed to hammer the last nail into this coffin lid, and then he went to the cell and told Yoon Se-jin. Standing in front of his niece, he added confidently to attract the audience's attention, "Honestly, I think I did a great job." Continuing to deflect the fan club's anger onto himself, he justified his actions by saying that the woman was his wife, but those who know him know that he is just an empty shell. After hearing Ji-han's words, the girl nervously exclaimed to her uncle, wondering if they hadn't planned to say that. Ignoring his niece's appeal to stop, the boy grabbed the sleeve of his tattered suit and said, "Do you really think we didn't realize that you flew to Japan because you couldn't handle it here?" In response to this application, one of the club's fans wrote in the comments, "Sung Ji-han, follow the words, Sung Ji-han with bronze declares that Yoon Se-jin is an empty place boogeyman." At the same time, Lee Ha-yeon and his subject were plunged into shock. After his loud statements shocked all the viewers, the guy tore off his sleeve and confidently added, "Enjoy your stay in Japan." Making an angry face at the camera in front of the hated traitor, Song-ji added, "And all because soon we will meet and I will destroy you." After the broadcast and everything had been said, Ji-han was changing clothes at home and wondered if it was necessary to go so far. Continuing to look through the comments to the video, the girl added that all Japanese and Koreans are now expressing their dissatisfaction, to which he confidently replied that everything was fine. Don't pay attention to them, or you will be nervous about trifles once again. Hearing her uncle's words, the girl was surprised to hear you say, "You've become someone else as if you've changed overnight." Hearing his niece Ji-san's remark, he scratched his cheek awkwardly. He thought, "She did notice, but I wouldn't be able to act as usual after dying and coming back in time." Continuing his conversation with the girl, Ji-han told me that I looked like a lazy man who had just drunk all day. To which Sia replied, "Why would you think that, even though it's true?" At the same time, a buzzer rang at their door, and the girl, surprised to hear that someone had come to their door, asked who it could be. Immediately after shoving his hands into his pockets, Sung-ji said, "I didn't expect it to happen so quickly," and then heard Yoon Se-a's worried voice exclaiming, "Don't tell me they're coming for you." In response, the guy smiled and confidently said, "Don't worry, it's not what you might think," and then added, "Well, we'll see." At the same time, Yoon Se-jin and I could not calm down after what happened on the stream in Tokyo, Japan. Watching the news feed in Japanese, he could see the relations between Korea and Japan deteriorating because the King of the Sword got another citizenship. They will be very disappointed to lose their best player. He is heavily criticized for taking such actions because of a woman, and everyone is interested in how beautiful she is. But the problem is that Mr. Ruke's son-in-law provoked him on the stream. And how will the King of the Sword react? Nothing unexpected. After watching the news, his son-in-law embodies the rage of all Koreans. Hearing his wife's question, Yoon Se-jin replied, "No, you woke up then," and said that after such a shock, it was difficult to fall asleep. "Se-jin, I'm worried that you have to go through such difficulties." In response, the man said to Shizuru, "You don't have to call me Se-jin anymore." Continuing to insist that his past life should not be mentioned anymore, the man added, "I took a different name, and that's why." Hugging him from behind, the woman replied, "No, you're wrong." Holding tightly to her lover during the hug, Shizuru added, "You, Yoon Se-jin, Korea's top player, King of the Sword Yoon Se-jin." Hearing what his beloved had just said, the man looked back and excitedly told to Shizuru, to which she replied that the truth could not be changed. As she began to kiss passionately with the man she had been able to force to betray his country, the woman confidently said, "You are my Yoon Se-jin." At the same time, opening the front door to greet the guest, Ji-han smiled slyly and said, "Welcome." Upon being invited inside, the guest removed his shoes and said, "Thank you. Please forgive me for intruding, but you were expecting my visit." In response to a question from a man standing on the doorstep of Sung-ji's house, he said, "No, not at all, but I knew that the government would definitely intervene if necessary." Looking at the man who represented the South Korean government, the manager of the BattleNet department, Park Young-sik, the boy said, "Please come in, Manager Park Young-sik." Pointing to where he could sit, the boy said, "Come on in," and then mentally added, "After Yoon Se-jin left, his department stopped coming to us." However, this person continued to ensure that Yoon Sia and I were considered, and then I heard from the manager that Sia had not seen him for a long time. When she saw who had come to visit them, the girl nervously said, in response to her husband's greeting, "I welcome you." After inviting the man inside, the boy closed the door and smiled slyly, thinking, "Now that everything is ready, I can take what I need." The firm's manager, having a cup of coffee with the daughter of his former representative, said, "I watched the show. It was pretty brutal. The government has accepted that we will not bring back the Sword King." Hearing this, Ji-han thought unhappily. They understood it. Then the manager added, "But we cannot let the citizens know about it so quickly." Continuing to circle around the main topic, Park Young-sik said that a battle between Korea and Japan would soon take place. Before he could finish, Sung-ji asked why we shouldn't get right to the point. Immediately after this offer, the boy added, "You want me to refuse the palace donation, right? It is an admission that the king will not return." When the manager heard the question from the guy sitting before him, he was surprised to hear how he had guessed. The next moment, recalling the past when he met this person, Park Young-sik thought, "This is exactly the same loser as I remember him being, unemployed and obsessed with gambling." Upon reflection, the man added, "You are absolutely right. We have not yet given up hope for his return. We offer you the opportunity to become a contract manager instead of donating." Hearing the offer, the girl was surprised to think, "What a scheme." Then Sung-ji said, "They're cunning. They want to put me in charge of the management until the real owner returns." Reflecting on the right choice after this offer, the guy asked if the house would go back to the owner when he returned, to which Park Yoon-sik replied, "You are absolutely right." The next moment, taking an envelope with a contract from his briefcase and handing it to the guy, the manager added, "It would be great if you stayed in the Sword Palace." While the guy was rereading the contract, the man said all the terms favor both parties, so read it and think about it. Ji-han thought they had sorted the situation out. Continuing to read the agreement's details, he mentally added, "I was going to give everything, but if they want something else, that's even better for me." Immediately after completing his thoughts, putting the contract on the table, and pressing it to the table, the guy confidently said, "I realized we would also like to ask for a favor." I heard what kind of favor he was asking for. After witnessing her uncle's words, Yoon Se-ah said in surprise, "And I also came out after that." Ji-han confidently said the fact is. At the same time, many players received a notification saying that the Golden Light had started its stream. When they entered it, viewers happily began to write, "Hi, you're streaming a stop. And where did he climb this time? That he was on the head of a Colosseum statue." Continuing to laugh happily, the guy gathering the audience said, "Welcome to my stream." Moving the camera to the place where he is this time, the golden light spoke today, and we returned to the bloody and dusty Colosseum. Jumping off the statue's head and moving to the center of the field, he confidently added to the streamer. The travel specialist came to you again, smiling happily. After recording his moment of landing in a not-so-great pose, one of the commenters was surprised to write that he was wearing underpants or something. The next moment, the guy got to his feet and confidently added a golden light to the streamer. After that, he received a donation with the comment, "Give it to these bronze fools." Seeing that he had just received the first money for the stream from the viewer, the guy started dancing and exclaimed joyfully, "Gods, I'm going to get it as a sign of my favor. I'll dance for you like 02. Oh, this is a dead trend." At the same time, while the streamer was doing this nonsense, his viewers wrote how disgusted they were with this trend. Still, other participants in the competition where this character was present were unhappy. Gritting his teeth in hatred, one of the participants said, "Oh shit." And then the other, shedding tears, added, "Oh shit. I prayed that he would be hit by a car again. This son of a bitch came." Quite a well-known player in various circles and also a streamer of Golden Light. He was mostly known for his appearance and hyperactivity, but he was also an exceptional clown from the very beginning. However, he used to be a pretty respectable person in the Golden League until he decided to go down to bronze, saying he would explore the depths of the sea. He is not interested in the game itself. He only cares about having fun. He's just a space jester. His characteristics and equipment remained at the golden rank level. While diving underwater to the sea creatures, the guy smiled crazily and said, "Wow, life is bubbling up at the bottom." His fun was beating and defeating the bronze players who were weaker than him. At the same time, the guy said in surprise that I was not such a thief after all, and the bronze players thought that he was a psychopath. When the guy got tired of standing there, he grabbed his sword and shouted, "Enough with the boring talk. Let's decide who will be the first victim. Let's see." While choosing a target for his stream, the Golden Light suddenly noticed a well-known person and shouted out the same content. Heading towards the guy he was interested in, Sun Jihan shouted out a golden light, which attracted the attention of the player who was also in the Colosseum. Holding out the microphone to Jihan, he exclaimed, "I'd like to interview you hearing the request." Songji thought, "What the hell then?" added Golden Light son-in-law of the Sword King, best bronze player destroyer of the two swords. "Statue, you have a lot of nicknames lately. Everyone is interested in you." When I heard the guy's questions and requests, I turned my head and thought he was a streamer from BattleTube, which is noisy. By the way, I have very few achievements left to get there. The next moment he opened his system window, activated his own live stream, and said in his head that he needed to increase his views. At the same time, showing a gesture of swearing into the lens, the Golden Light confidently said, "Wow, people are just ignoring me." Immediately after, several comments appeared on the guy's stream, saying, "Hey, he seems to have started a live broadcast as well, and let's go watch it." I thought, I'm really confused when I saw this Golden Light. Panicking that his bread might be taken away from him, the boy biting his nails thought, "Oh shit, I've advertised it for free." Panicking about his actions, he mentally said, "I need people to watch my stream, not his." Suddenly, a notification appeared in front of him that read, "The viewer has given you the task to finish off Sung Ji-han so that he takes the last place. The reward is 2,000 points of equipment." Seeing this, he mentally said that 1 point of equipment is worth about 1,000 won, and here they are worth 2 million. Immediately afterward, 2 more comments appeared. "Golden Light, please finish Song Ji-han. For the sake of the Sword King fandom, we will increase the reward." When the streamer saw the comments, the Sword King fandom thought in surprise. As he watched new viewers with the same avatars appear and their rewards grow, he added, "I knew they hated Song Ji-han, but not that much." When he saw several dozen notifications with the words "award" enlarged again, the boy was amazed and said, "They are simple." Watching the rapid growth rate of the reward for the destruction of one player from the bronze, the Golden Light grabbed his mouth in shock and thought the number of points would soon reach 40,000 and then 50 if they continued like this. The donation stopped the next moment, and a system notification appeared, informing all players that the game had started. When he saw that the sum had stopped at 42,713 points of equipment, the Golden Light fell on the circle and shouted in disappointment. Putting his hands over his face, the guy who had not reached his goal said in disappointment, 50,000 is not enough." Hearing the words of despair from the guy who was their hope, one of the King of Swords fan club members wrote to defeat Song Ji-han. and I'll add 10,000 points of equipment. Hearing the spectator's promise, the guy felt a sudden burst of motivation, grabbed his sword, and said sternly, "Your determination has been passed on to me." Turning his gaze to the guy who was about to die at his hands, the famous streamer confidently said, "You can despair now." Having taken a combat stance and started preparing for his powerful surprise strike to quickly deal with the target and get the reward, he added a golden glow to me now. Activating the charge skill, which accelerates the user's body, allows you to rush forward at a tremendous speed, the fighter said, ending your game. As he approached his target, who was standing with her back to him, the boy shouted in a frantic tone, "I will be your personal death with a scythe." At the last moment before the attack, Sung Ji-han reacted and repelled his attacker's sudden attack with the pestle with which he had arrived at the Colosseum. When he saw his sword suddenly bounce off its target and head backward, the man exclaimed in confusion. At the same time, looking at his D-ranked pestle in his hands, Song Ji-han said what a beautiful and strong sword it was. The next moment, reaching into his inner pocket with his other free hand, the boy added, "I'll fight with what I have." Pulling out another weapon that complemented the set of kitchen utensils, the boy confidently added, "If you have a sword, you have a sword." After activating the holy power skill on the kitchen knife, a divine artifact, he confidently said, "I should do the same." The next moment, with a few swings, Sun Ji-han quickly crushed his enemy to pieces, leaving him no chance of victory. At the end of the short first fight against a mighty enemy, the boy received a system notification that said the player Sung Ji-han shed his first blood, and his achievement points increased by 100. After receiving this system notification, Ji-han looked at his knife, which he had just finished off the enemy, and thought, "It's been a while since I cooked anything." The next moment, behind his opponent, the Golden Light used the artifact to shout, "I am the Golden Light resurrected for the sake of all of you." The revival action was made possible by the artifact of the Cross of Revival, which allows the owner to be resurrected once and cannot be used during national leagues of promotional games or guild battles. Immediately after the revival, the Golden Light put his hand to his head and awkwardly said, "God, because of my inattention, so many of you were disappointed, but wait a little longer. Soon I will pay Song Ji-han back." Before he could finish speaking, he suddenly felt a strange sensation. Someone was looking at him, and at the same time, his opponent was standing right behind him. Realizing his awkward position, the boy nervously began slowly turning his eyes back to look around. When Ji-san appeared in his field of vision, he became visibly nervous. Immediately after his series of strikes, Ji-han finished off the enemy again, after which a system notification appeared, and the player Sun Ji-han made a double kill. After the final victory over his enemy, the boy looked back. He thought, "It's been a long time since I've seen anyone use this, and in the future, the resurrection will not be used not because of fines, but because of the vulnerable position of the resurrected." The next moment, he turned his attention to the tribune, where the spectators were, and mentally said, "Today, the situation is more tense here, perhaps because the observers have come to watch the beginning of the battle." Looking closely at the enemies of those who had come to watch the training process, the boy mentally added that today they were elves. Continuing to drill his gaze into the newly arrived race of observers, Sung Ji said in his head, "They make me shake. These scoundrels played a significant role in the downfall of humanity." The next moment, looking back at the battlefield, the guy added, "Well, I was planning to deal with them later, but now I need to focus on more critical issues." Looking around, Ji-han noticed that all the enemies were keeping away from him, and then he was surprised to hear that I was considered an outcast. The next moment, all the fighters in the arena began to run away, screaming and making a frightened noise. Continuing to run away from the monster, one of the players exclaimed, "Now is not the time to fight against each other. Let's run away." After this, another player added Song Ji-han, and even the Golden League player won. Realizing the point of the escape of all the enemies in the arena, Ji-han sighed heavily and said in his head, "Now it will be much harder to destroy them." The next moment, raising his weapon in front of him, the boy said, "I finally found the D-rank sacred items, and then I thought I needed to participate more in battles to fulfill the conditions for their use." The next moment, when he heard a strange sound near him, the boy looked forward and said in surprise, "What the hell is that?" After receiving a system notification that said to conquer the goblins and defeat all the goblins that gathered around the goblin champion, the guy saw a crowd of monsters approaching him. However, despite this development of events, the guy was even glad that everything happened this way. Sometime after the start of the hunt, catching up with one of the enemies, he could hear the monster shouting, Save me. However, no one was going to help him the next second, so to avoid attracting unnecessary attention, the guy hit the monster on the head with a pestle, knocking it out of consciousness. The next moment after this action, he pierced the enemy's chest with his knife with sacred power. After the last enemy was destroyed, Jihan received system notifications that said the conditions for using holy items were met. The items from the D-rank cooking set were used together, and then he thought he knew how to use them. Imagining an approximate picture of the combination in his mind, he mentally said, "You need to hit one on the head and pierce the heart with the other. Since they are from a set, they have a certain order of use." Immediately after looking around after fully mastering the tactics of fighting with his weapon, the guy mentally said, "It's good that I realized this before the battle ended." Only when the dust cleared did he look around and see that all the goblins had been defeated, adding disappointedly, "But I still wasted a lot of time. If I had mastered it earlier, I could have killed a couple more goblins." After expressing his disappointment about the protracted training, he noticed that not all enemies were defeated, although he was dissatisfied. At the same time, the last enemy was standing right in front of him. Then a notification appeared that said, "Goblin Champion, compared to ordinary goblins whose height is 1 meter, has grown to 3 meters and has more physical and mental strength." Then, the guy gave a long description. But despite the long description of the monster in front of him, Jihan quickly knocked him to the ground with just one blow to the head with a pestle. The next moment, when he picked up a kitchen knife to complete the attacks, Sun Ji confidently added to the attack. But for what purpose? Having dealt the last blow to his opponent and pierced a hole in his heart, Jihan confidently added that he was tall. After the last enemy was destroyed, the boy received system notifications that said the task was completed. He had conquered the goblins. He had received 500 points of achievement, and he had received 1 point of divine power. Seeing that his weapons had dropped by 1 rank, the boy thought, "If they are still rank E, I can earn divine power points again. But these items are unsuitable for killing monsters." The next moment, he turned his gaze to the other participants on the battlefield and thoughtfully added time to hunt for the players. Still, they were far away from me. After assessing the distance between himself and his opponents, the guy rolled up his right sleeve and said, "Of course, it will be pretty dull, but nothing can be done." The next moment, he rolled up the right sleeve of his shirt and added, "If they don't want to come to me, they can come to me. Then I'll go to them myself." The boy lit up with an aura of blue flame and confidently walked toward the rest of the opponents who were fighting somewhere nearby. At the same time, somewhere in Seoul's Gangnam district, near Yoksan Station, was the home of the famous Golden Light that collapsed with a bang. Watching his live stream and reading the comments, he angrily exclaimed that he was talking about me now, and not so long ago, he was sucking up to me, saying that being a talented streamer is quite tricky. Am I weak? He is absurdly strong. Don't you watch videos with analytics at all? Switching to the video with the analytics, the streamer pointed to a sign that said, "Approximate characteristic points. Strength 33, dexterity 37, HP 36, OM 34, and exclaimed that these were his approximate stats in the battle with the goblins, an average of 35. The next moment, putting his head on the table, the Golden Ray said in disappointment that there are a maximum of 20 people in the Bronze League. So how did he get so many? He's just a cheater. While the streamer continued to console himself, he heard a scream from the broadcast, and then, wondering what it was, looked up and saw a notification that the player Sun Ji-han had been killed. Continuing to watch the guy efficiently deal with all the enemies he encountered, the Golden Ray was surprised to hear what kind of player he was. After using his combination again, Ji-han received a system notification informing him that player Sun Ji-han had made a double elimination. At the same time, viewers wrote in the comments on the stream he was streaming that it was a real art how one person could defeat 4 people in the air. Noticing that the main threat had switched to them, one of the players shouted out in fright that this was no time to fight each other. "Come on, buff me, you idiot. You have items," to which the mage replied that you were the idiot with the crossbow. When the reinforcements began to take effect, one of the players who joined the team with another opponent shouted to Sun Ji-han, "Hey, cheater." After firing several quick shots from his crossbow, he confidently added, "That's enough, get out of here." However, despite several arrows flying at him, the boy efficiently managed to deal with them all. Seeing that their joint attack failed, the pair of players who had provoked the monster began to smile hysterically. The next moment, after dealing with a couple of reckless players who attacked him, Jihan received a system notification that said the player Song Jihan had made a double kill. Immediately after the battle with a couple of players, the guy received another notification. Items of the E-rank cooking set used together. You received 1 point of divine power. The rank of the items from the cooking set is lowered. Immediately afterward, he received another notification that said a hidden achievement. Achieve 10 destructions in the Colosseum, and you would receive 5,000 achievement points. Seeing this, he mentally said, divine power and achievement points. I got everything I wanted. However, despite his rewards, the guy was disappointed and thought, that's not enough for now. I need something more substantial. As soon as he said this, another notification appeared in front of him. An epic task among the Colosseum spectators. Find the Queen of Shadows and provoke her. He shouted the same epic task in surprise. Looking at the high rank of his task, the guy was surprised to think that it was given in the Bronze League and, more importantly, the reward. The reward notification said to reward 50,000 points for achieving the constellation of the Shadow Queen's interest, and he was surprised to think that the constellation was interested. A constellation is an absolute being, a representative of a star and a divine creature in the battle star. And a message of interest from such a person means only one thing: they can become your sponsor. It will also help to acquire abilities that are so easy to obtain after mentioning these creatures. The guy thought what is happening in the Diamond League is happening to me right now. Raising his head from the podium, the boy mentally said he needed to complete this task at any cost. If he could lure one constellation to his side, the others would be interested. Starting to run his eyes around the seats on the stand, the guy nervously added, I wonder if I'll be able to find her. Paying attention to a couple of spectators looking at him sternly, Seungji mentally spoke among so many elves. Looking at the many representatives of the other race who focused on him, Jihan mentally added the Shadow Queen. At the same time, somewhere on the internet, there were already heated discussions about the new record of 10 destructions of Song Jihan in the Colosseum. These indicators managed to shift Yoon Se-jin's score, and the news spread like wildfire among people. As a result of this news, he gained about 10,000 subscribers and 4,000 regular viewers. Those who were fans of the King of the Sword and dreamed that Song Jihan would lose with the others became his supporters. All their anger at the moment was directed at the Golden Ray. Comments started appearing under his video, such as how a guy from the Bronze League could beat someone who was in the Golden League, and I hope you try Golden Ray. Looking at the comments that dissatisfied viewers continue to write to him, the guy nervously said, I'm in trouble, and my reputation is getting lower and lower every minute. The next moment, the guy stood up from his seat and confidently said, but there's nothing you can do from that moment on. Raising his hand above him, the Golden Ray confidently said, I will also be on Song Jihan's side. You have a new phantom. The Golden Ray dreams of becoming Song Jihan's editor. I'll definitely make your BattleTube popular. Upon hearing this statement, the audience was surprised to hear him say, you don't know what he means and what Song Jihan is thinking about. After the competition in the Colosseum, Sia said in amazement, wow, what have I just seen? Continuing to drill her uncle with a look as he sipped his water after returning, she added, when did you manage to become so strong? The next moment, turning her gaze back to the TV, she added, I feel sorry for the others. It's a plague on the world. And then added, you sound like an asshole. Immediately after the girl made her remark, she asked in surprise how many players wanted to dump the donation and why you closed them on that one and opened her channel. He awkwardly replied, oh, sorry, I forgot to set it up. Hearing what her uncle would do, Yoon Sia said, if you're just now starting this, why don't you raise the minimum amount? Continuing to give her instructions, the girl added that it would be difficult to concentrate if they came one after another. In response to this, Jihan replied correctly, I will set a minimum of 10,000 points of equipment, to which he heard in response that, yes, it is 1,000,000 won. At the same time, Seungji was sitting in the chair thinking about something much more critical, and Sia wondered if it was still insufficient. Continuing to think about how he could accomplish the task, the guy mentally said, an epic task, which means I have to find and provoke the Shadow Queen. The next moment, recalling the number of elves in the stands, he mentally added, I just haven't figured out how to find her among so many spectators yet. Suddenly, his thoughts were interrupted when he heard someone address him and ask if he wanted me to help you. Turning his gaze to his niece, Jihan heard her say happily, you always have that look on your face when something goes wrong. Tell me and I'll help. Hearing his niece's offer of help, Jihan smiled gently and thought she was very much like her sister. Immediately after mentioning the person this girl reminds him so much of, Seungji said, Really, then let's see how you handle it. The next moment he said, I have a task to find the Shadow Queen in the Colosseum. Hearing this, the girl asked in surprise who the Shadow Queen was, and Jihan added, I don't know, but I only know that she is among the audience. Then Seiya added a strange task. Immediately after hearing the task and being inspired, the girl happily exclaimed, I'll look through the game and find it, to which Sungji replied, I'll wait for news. As he headed to another room after shifting the search responsibility, the boy mentally said, I feel bad for asking for help. Closing the door behind him after he got to his room, the boy mentally added that it was like looking for a needle in a haystack. With a sigh of relief, the guy said, I'm proud of her, and then thought, I'm sure she is sincerely willing to help, so I can only thank her for that. Immediately after opening the system window that displayed his classes, the boy said, as long as I have time. Starting to do what he had been procrastinating for a long time, the guy confidently added what he had to do for a long time, and then received a system notification that he wanted to add a class. After pumping a place for an additional class to the second level in the skill store, Jihan mentally said, I bought an extra classroom for the points I earned. Now I can add another class. When the list of available classes opened before him, the boy thoughtfully said, I'll choose this time. Pointing to the ribbon with the words wizard on it, the guy confidently said, wizard. Immediately after selecting the new class, the guy was enveloped in a magical aura. A notification appeared above him saying that you have added the mage class. After gaining new skills, Sunji put his hand to his chest and said thoughtfully, I feel a new power coming from my heart, different from the divine. The next moment, recalling all the reasons for his decision, the guy mentally said, I need to try the reason why I chose the mage class after the support player. This is because of the unique characteristic only after 2 cash registers have been received. Having experienced something he had only heard about before, the guy saw that he achieved the desired result and spoke with power. Once in my past life, while having a drink, I had a particular conversation with Baron, and he heard Jihan, and I was very sad. Trying to somehow disown his guildmaster, the boy replied, Sir, how much longer are you going to keep saying that? To which the guildmaster replied, If you had gotten your citizenship a little earlier, I would have recognized you as an American and treated you better. Every time he got drunk, Baron shared his excitement with me, and that day he told me something unusual. That evening, the guildmaster said to his subject, I think we will become closer someday. Using his magic to hold the bottle of alcohol and simultaneously emptying the glass, the man added, when I get the power. When Guildmaster Jihan heard what he had just said, he asked him if he was talking about the power, and he replied in surprise that he hadn't told you about it. Focusing his gaze on Verena, Jihan felt the power. This characteristic appears when the divine power and mana are perfectly combined. Continuing to look at my leader, who was drunk and did not control what he was saying, the guy heard, and this is very difficult to achieve for others. I am the only player with 2 classes. Recalling that he has 2 types of support classes and a mage, Baron confidently said, I'm the only one who can wield power because I have 2 state windows. While relaxing over a drink in his home, the guildmaster heard from Jihan that there were no more conditions for receiving it. Jihan replied that he needed to have 10 or more points of divine power. Then Sungji added, I'm not an American. I can get something like that. In response to this question, Baron happily said, No one else has 2 classes except me, and nothing would change even if the whole world knew about it. Continuing to recall the conversation that evening, the guy mentally added, He was very impolite, but I didn't dare argue with him. However, it was definitely true that only Baron possessed a power superior to the divine. As he continued to conquer the characteristic of strength he had received after receiving the 2nd grade, the boy mentally said, But that was before. Trying to somehow keep this power to himself, the guy, feeling a lot of pain, said in his head, I know what the conditions are. This characteristic brought Baron to the first place in the world, and even though he did not develop and control it well, I must get it to cope with the challenges in the future. Continuing to writhe in pain, the boy mentally said, I must endure. I must concentrate the divine power in my hands. Continuing to draw up a plan of action to pump up the control of this characteristic, he mentally added and directed the same mana from his heart, combining it with it. Holding his hand in the sphere that had formed with great force, he mentally added that he needed to concentrate so that nothing would leak out. As soon as he felt he was starting to get it, the boy smiled nervously and said, I've got it. Before he could finish, He lost his concentration momentarily and threw the guy through the door. After a hard landing, Ji-san grabbed his head and groaned heavily due to the failed experiment. Rising to a sitting position, Ji-han considered how he could master this power. He thought, I can't just hold them with my hands. What should I do? Leaning on the door after the failure, the guy thoughtfully said, maybe I should increase my mana supply, and then thought it was completely spent after the first attempt. Raising his hand in front of him again, the boy thought in his head, and whether it would be possible to combine the two energies in his hands and hold them forever is not an option. The next moment, realizing what he had just said, the boy came to a particular logical conclusion and spoke forever in his head. Closing his eyes to increase his concentration and improve his imagination, he mentally said to himself that he didn't need to hold it. Continuing his reflections on correctly using this energy, he thought it was possible to move it and the body. While performing certain mental activities, Ji-han said in his head that he would take the divine power originating in the upper dantian and combine it with the mana of the middle one, holding it together with the power of the lower one. The guy thought, continuing to combine different types of magic to achieve the result. At the same time, they will mix and take the perfect shape. If you compress them in this state immediately after combining, something unpredictable happens. When Song-ji forcefully mixed different types of magic, he received a system notification that said, you are trying to combine 3 dantian with the energy that enveloped his entire body. Feeling unbearable pain, the guy began to moan heavily and the threat message continued to appear, saying that you were trying to combine 3 dantians. Immediately after that, a threat notification appeared, indicating that the player had exceeded his limit. The life-threatening situation was discovered at the same time Yoon-si, who heard strange screams from her uncle's room, suddenly jumped to her feet. Now for an explanation of what is happening and what the guy is doing, this procedure is called the unification of the 3 dantians. Sung Ji-han tried to merge divine power and mana to use the power and subconsciously added combat power to them. However, the conditions for combining the 3 dantian are very strict. You must be able to perfectly utilize each of them, which has its own distinctive nature. But the restrictions do not end there. In addition to mastery of each characteristic, they must equal or exceed 100 points. But if someone tries to combine this without proper preparation, the daredevil will likely lose his life in the experiment. Hearing extraneous sounds that should not be there, the niece, distracted from her task, nervously thought that a particular scream was coming from her uncle's room. Quickly heading to her guardian's room to check on him, the girl shouted to her uncle, "Uncle, what's wrong?" When she opened the door to her uncle's room, she screamed out to her uncle in fear, but when she saw that he was now fine, she calmed down. Drawing a bowl of cold water and towels, Sia said something insulting, like you were screaming because of a headache, to which he replied, "Yes." And then the girl added, "How did you feel better so quickly?" After removing the cool compress from his head, Song-ji turned his head away and said, "The human body is amazing," his niece replied with a displeased look of seriousness. When he heard the girl's remark, the boy awkwardly said, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to make you angry." Covering her face with her hands, the girl began to cry and said, wiping her tears with her hands, "I was terrified. I thought something terrible had happened to you." Hearing his niece's worried words, the man said, "I was inattentive and should have thought of Sia." After a while, the girl stopped crying, wiped away the remnants of her tears and asked, "So everything is okay with you?" In response to his niece's question, Ji-han awkwardly threw his arm around her neck and replied, "I'm fine." Feeling guilty for what he had done, the boy added, "I'm sorry for making you worry." Hearing this, the girl looked at him, confused. Immediately after, Yoon-sia, deciding to diffuse the sad atmosphere, poked her uncle in the chest and exclaimed, "Come on, I'm not worried. You said it yourself. Everything is fine." Rising from her seat after settling the situation, she added, "Then I will go on looking for the Shadow Queen." Hearing her niece's words, Ji-han replied dejectedly, "Yes, thank you." As the girl returned to her room, Sung Ji-han breathed a sigh of relief and thought it was better not to show her his weaknesses. Immediately after turning his gaze to the system notification that said he had failed to merge 3 dantians, the guy mentally added, "The merge of 3 dantians failed because I have a low level and insufficient points." Immediately after using the magic of telepathy to twist the towel away from the excess moisture, Ji-han happily added, "But it doesn't matter now." Using the newly acquired strength, the boy happily added the strength characteristics I had gained. After combining divine power and mana, They are replaced by a unique characteristic called the power of the three Dantians. However, the merger of divine power and mana created the power. The next moment, looking at his status window, Songji saw a notification that the connection between the three Dantians was weak and exclaimed in surprise that the number of strength points was strange. The first notification was followed by the second, which said that combat power and forces characteristics interact and share their value. Immediately after stretching his hand to the combat power characteristic, the boy thoughtfully said, "So if I pump one characteristic, then..." Seeing that his strength had increased after him, Songji grabbed his head and said the same thing. Smiling embarrassedly after realizing what he now had, the boy said, "I already had the power very well, but how effective would the three united Dantians be?" Continuing to think about the fact that he would not have one in the near future, the guy mentally said, "Okay, I'll leave this question for now. If I try to do it at the current level, I will definitely bend over." When he finished thinking about something unattainable, Ji-han looked in front of him and said confidently, "I got what I wanted. Now it's time to test the magician's abilities." Using his mana to check the magic, the guy said the fire, after which a small light appeared in his hands, and a notification appeared that he did not have enough mana. The following day, after resting and recuperating, the guy received a system notification that he had received 10 points of divine mileage. He saw the sun's rays breaking through the curtains and said it was morning. Immediately after, he received more system notifications that said he could not absorb divine power from sacred items of rank D and below. He should use divine items of rank C and above. Getting up from the bed, the guy yawned deliciously and said, "I hoped it would work, but alas, I thought, well, they were cheap. I bought them for points." Going to the living room to greet his niece, the boy said he needed to sell the leftovers at a flea market. Then he opened the door and asked Sia, "Are you awake?" Not seeing the girl in her usual residence, Sungji went to her room and was surprised to find her still asleep. Hearing the stomp of feet on the stairs, Yunxia took off the earpiece and said tiredly, "Oh, uncle, you're awake." Surprised by the look on his niece's face, Ji-han asked, "What happened to your face? Did you not sleep all night?" She replied, "I was watching the reruns," to which the guy added that there was no need to go that far. After her guardian's remark, the girl called him over, pointed at the screen and said, "I found something." He looked at it and said the same thing in surprise. When he saw the video's screensaver, which was turned on by a girl, Ji-han was surprised to hear a fan's video. In response, he heard that this is how people who received the scaling as a gift only shot people of other races. Hearing how other users were using their gifts, Sungji was disappointed to think they were using such a fantastic gift for covert action. Before he could grumble enough about the waste of his talent, Yunxia interrupted his discontent by exclaiming, "Look at this!" After rewinding the video to the moment when a couple of people were filmed on thrones, the girl added a repeat of "your battle," after which a voice came from the video saying, "Look at the elf there, they have the best skin with no flaws." Looking at the pair of elves who were being covertly filmed, Yunxia said, "They both look like high-ranking elves, but there is a dark elf among them, and she would be a good fit for the title of queen. In my opinion, the Shadow Queen should be a dark elf." Continuing to build her guesses and show what she had found, the girl asked him how, to which he replied very convincingly, "You did a great job." After which, the girl added that it was too early to draw conclusions, so I'll look again. As the niece continued scouring the internet for more information, Sungji mentally said, "I doubt that the constellation can be found that easily." The next moment, the girl said, "Tomorrow, I'll watch videos from foreign channels." The guy replied in surprise, "Wow, you're a professional." She replied, "I even made a video for you." When he heard what Sia Ji-han had made especially for him, he was surprised you knew how to edit. He replied, "Yes, a little earlier. I made videos of my father's games for fun." Hearing that she even did this for her father, the boy looked at the broken portrait of the C family. He thought, "You really did abandon your daughter, you infantile bastard." Now let's go back 2 days. Sitting at the table with Ji-han and Sia, the manager said, "I think I know who the Sword King's girlfriend is." Hearing this, the girl rose from her seat and exclaimed, "Indeed, and who is she?" Then the man added, "Her name is Ito Shizuru." Continuing his story, Park Yun-sik added that she possesses a gift of SSS rank of unsurpassed beauty. Hearing this, a couple of young people froze in place in surprise. Immediately after hearing this, Ji-han exclaimed in confusion, "And you think that this is why he fell in love with her?" What he heard in response is that the department thinks so. The next moment, thinking about the gift, the boy said, "I've never heard of this before," Park Young-sik added. "Please be very careful." Continuing to voice the warnings, the manager added, "We suspect that unsurpassed beauty is beyond control and affects the mind. Something similar has already happened before, and it is not the first time that Eastern stars of our country have taken Japanese citizenship. If this gift is unlimited, it can be switched to another player simultaneously." Recalling the manager's words again, Jihan stood by the penthouse windows and mentally said, "Since that day, I have been looking for information about Ito Shizuru, a woman of incomparable beauty." Having not found any information about this person, the guy mentally said, "But so far I have no information. Japan is probably hiding her identity." Resigned to the fact that searching for information is a waste of time, the guy took the phone out of his hands and mentally said, "Now I can't find anything, just like Manager Park said. I should be more careful." Heading away from the window to begin his preparations, the man thought, "We need to be prepared in advance for sudden changes in circumstances." After reviewing the contingency plan, he added confidently that if the manager is right, they have already started to act. At the same time, a self-defense plane flew over the building that once belonged to the King of the Sword, after which Jihan added that the Japanese self-defense forces had already arrived in Korea. After a while, the beautifully dressed Yoon-si, waiting at the exit, said to Uncle, "How much longer do you need?" Continuing to hurry her escort, the girl added, "We might be late for that." She replied, "Okay, I understand. I'm almost ready in a few seconds." After creating his image for the solemn meeting of foreign guests, Sung Ji-han confidently said, "Let's go." Straightening his jacket before heading to the meeting place, the guy said with a sly smile, "Well, it's time to welcome our dear guests." Going down in the elevator to the lower floors where everything was supposed to happen, the girl hid her worries and felt nervous. After voicing his question, Jihan added, "Relax, nothing to worry about." Hearing her uncle's reassurance, the girl sighed with relief and said, "This is the first time I've been in public since my father's accident, so I'm nervous." In response to his niece's worried words, the boy confidently said, "Be confident and brave. Just like last time, there is no need to think about what others will say. We did nothing wrong." In response to his niece's worried words, the boy confidently said, "Be confident and brave. Just like last time, there is no need to think about what others will say. We did nothing wrong." In response to her uncle's advice, the girl raised her head and confidently said, "I understand you." A few seconds later, the elevator's arrival bell rang and a couple of young people arrived in the building's lobby. Then Sung-ji spoke to everyone who already knew. "What we will say." After the phrase was spoken, the boy and his niece headed to the rest of the people who had gathered for the event. They had not left the elevator when the guy suddenly heard one of the guests address him saying, "We were expecting you, Sung Ji-han. All your requests have been fulfilled, so please come with us," he happily replied. "Thank you. Please make sure that everything goes smoothly at this event." Looking at the man who organized the case, he confidently added the manager, Park Young-sik. Walking with the auction organizers to the main hall where everything will be held, the manager said, "At first, your request took me by surprise." Having brought his main organizers to the hall where everything would take place, the man added, "I did not expect you to want to put the Sword King's collectibles on sale." When he arrived at the place where the stage screen read, "Auction of the favorite items and other property of the former Sword King Yoon Se-jin," Park Young-sik added, "I did not expect that you would want to put the Sword King's collectibles up for sale." Looking at the table with a sign that read Japan Self-Defense Forces, the manager said, surprised, that it was necessary to attract Japan's attention. In response to Park Young-sik's question, who did not understand this choice, Jihan confidently answered yes, precisely because I had selected these lots. Turning his gaze to the chair and a couple of storage boxes placed on the table next to it, the boy confidently added Yoon Se-jin's connector and the data stored on the server. Imagining a particular situation in his mind, and realizing that Japanese representatives were already on their way, Song-ji added that Japan would likely try to take them over. Continuing his thoughts, the guy mentioned a very eager person to get these items at any price and added depending on certain circumstances. He may even intervene personally, but whatever he does, citizens will be forced to face reality and realize that they have no choice but to accept it. Hearing the approximate development of events that could happen in the future, Manager Yoon-sik mentally said while looking at the boy Sung Ji-han. Ching seems to see the future, while the guy confidently walks on and says, "This is our last chance to change the public's mind. Please ask reporters to follow the Japanese Self-Defense Forces table. The next moment, someone's nervous shout came from the entrance. Sia Yun Sia, wait! While at the same time holding back the guests who were trying to break through, the guards shouted, "You can't come in here! Please move back!" Continuing to break through the guards, the woman did not give up hope and shouted for just 1 minute that we were her relatives. When she heard the cries and messages about her relatives, she looked back. She nervously exclaimed that her aunt and uncle had also arrived. Continuing to push through the guards, my aunt exclaimed, "Sia, you're crazy. You may need money, but how could you hold an auction of valuable things?" The next moment, turning her gaze to the guy who was accompanying her, she added, "You made her do it! And how dare you try to sell someone else's inheritance, you crook!" As she continued to listen to the accusations against her uncle, she sighed heavily and said, "He's a fraud. You and other relatives were thrown out for using your father's name to deceive people." Shocking her family with a sharp statement, the girl confidently added, "You underestimate me too much. According to you, I'm completely stupid. In your opinion, I don't see who really looks after my father's money in his absence." Hearing the accusations against her, my aunt exclaimed in confusion, "God, watch what you say." Continuing to load her mercantile family with accusations, Yun Sia confidently said, "Everything my father left behind is my property. You have no right to decide the fate of these things." Immediately after saying this, the girl walked on with her head held high and added, "Take them out. They don't belong here. Come on, uncle." In response to the girl's application, the relatives were scared and shouted out, "Hey, my hey," to which the security guards replied, "No unauthorized persons allowed. Please leave the building." While looking at his niece, Sungji said, "You're so cool," to which she confidently replied, "I can defend myself." While the young couple was discussing the concession, Park Young-sik opened the door to the hall and said, "We have arrived." Pointing in the direction they would go next, the manager added, "I'll take you inside." As soon as the auction organizers appeared on stage, the audience immediately exclaimed, "Here they are." Concentrating all their attention on the young man who accompanied the heritage owner, the journalists shouted out to Sung Ji-han to take his picture. Getting under the flashes of the lenses that did not stop photographing him, the guy heard Sung Ji-han say, "Why are you holding the auction? I heard you banned foreigners from participating in it. What was the reason for this decision?" At the same time, Sia herself was caught in the lens, squinting from the blinding flashes and hearing, "Yun Sia, please look here. Is it true that your decision to give the sword to the palace and organize an auction was provoked by public pressure?" Continuing to ask questions of a couple of people who appeared on the stage, the journalists shouted out, "If you do not believe that the King of the Sword will return, what can you say to those who think that you are trying to make money on the property of the King of the Sword?" As he continued to the place from which he would conduct the auction, the guy again heard Sung Ji-han's question. "Say a few words about your recent battle in Battleground." Unable to restrain himself from asking questions, the guy used his strength and broke all the cameras of reporters and journalists taking pictures of him and Sia, after which the photographers exclaimed in confusion. Not understanding what happened to their devices, the journalists nervously exclaimed why the camera suddenly went bad, why it wouldn't turn on, and what happened. After cleaning up the problem, which could not be solved alone, Ji-han sternly said, "This is not a press conference, but an auction, so please keep your voice down." Immediately after warning everyone about the auction's location, the guy leaned on the table before him and said, "Let's start our auction." After announcing the auction, the guy pointed to the first item to be sold and said, "We have prepared 3 lots. The first is Yoon Se-jin's battleship connector, which reduces pain by 99%. Next, pointing to the cassettes with the videos they contained, Sun-ji added, "In addition, we have Yoon Se-jin's analysis of himself and high-ranking East Asian players." Upon hearing about the second lot, which contained valuable information, one of the bidders thoughtfully said, "The King of Swords data is very valuable and incredibly useful, especially now that the battle between Korea and Japan is approaching." After announcing all the lots that would be sold at this auction, the guy looked at the guests and confidently said that they would definitely not want to miss any of these backgrounds. Continuing to look around at all the event participants sitting in the hall, the guy thought he could not get a debriefing from a high-ranking player anywhere. The next moment, raising his hand amid the crowd discussing the lots, the man suddenly said, "I'm sorry," to attract attention. As soon as everyone turned to him, the man beside the bodyguard said, "I am Takeda Kazuo, the recruitment manager." When the guy's attention shifted from his bodyguard to him, the man added that he was a member of the Japanese self-defense forces. The next moment, raising his finger, the man said, "Well, if the auction has already started, I can offer my price." Without waiting for an answer from Takeda Kazuo, the guy who was running the auction, I said, "I'm offering 5 billion won for all the lots." Putting everyone present in a state of shock, the man confidently added, "I would also like to ask for a personal meeting with Song Han and Yoon Seo." Hearing the guest's request, Han mentally said, "I see right through him." After expressing his own thoughts about the guest's intentions, Ji-han turned to the foreign manager and said, "I'm sorry, but it's hard to arrange." Stopping in front of a man sitting at a table of the Japanese self-defense forces, the guy confidently added, "If you have something to say to me, then speak up." Continuing to pressure the man and gently rejecting his offer of a personal meeting, he added, "This is not the time or place to accept a meeting, and I think Japan knows this firsthand." After receiving a response from the auction organizer, Takeda Kazuo, Sung-san awkwardly said, "When you look at me like that, I feel a little scared. I'm a guest, so don't be so unfriendly to me." After demonstrating his fear, the man smiled slyly. He added, "If you continue to be hostile, I will be treated with hostility." Immediately after these words, his bodyguard drew his sword before Ji-han and prepared to fight. At the same time, the manager added that someone would have to intervene. Paying attention to the girl, whose eyes showed that she was very strict, Ji-han heard, my bodyguard shadow. As the girl's bodyguard pressed the hilt of her sword against the boy's neck, Takeda Kazuo said she could not be compared to Ken-Oh, the Sword King, but she was also an impressive player. Immediately after these words, I realized that he had overstepped the bounds of what was permissible, and to maintain tact, said, "Oh, I am not threatening you in any way. I'm just keeping you informed." Hearing the strange mockery of the man who tried to intimidate him, Sungji could barely contain himself. Feeling rage when the bodyguard allowed herself to be too much on someone else's territory, the boy mentally asked what kind of fool she was, a copy of Yoon Sejin. It all happened very quickly. The shadow appeared in front of Sung Ji-han. The guy himself was not the most frightening, so he hit her, causing her to take a few steps back. Realizing what had just happened, the bodyguard gritted her teeth in rage, grabbed her sword and said, "Let's continue," but saw a hand raised above her. Then putting his hand on the shoulder of the shadow, which suddenly began to tremble, Sung Ji-han said in a stern tone, "You better give up your idea. This auction is broadcast on my battle tube around the world." Continuing to pressure the girl, the guy confidently added, "You're not going to pull out your sword in front of the whole world." At that time, someone wrote in the comments, "Oh shit, she's crossing all the lines." Realizing that his subject had lost in a power battle against Ji-han, Takeda Kazuo waved his hand and said nervously, "Oh, stop it, stop it." As soon as the shadow stepped back and turned his head to the side, the man began to bow. My bodyguard said, rather fervently, "Please accept my apologies." As he continued to make amends for his employee's actions, the manager suddenly raised his head and said slyly, "But Sung, we still need to clarify something." Paying attention to the girl standing behind Ji-han, the man said, "I'm ready to pay 5 billion subject to a personal meeting, but I have to accept this offer." Concentrating all his attention on the young girl who stood off to the side, Takeda Kazuo said to Yun-san, who heard his name and exclaimed nervously that it was me. When he heard the request from the foreign manager, Ji-han was confused by it. Then he added, "The property of the Sword King belongs to her. I am right." Passing by the guy who stood in the way of his plans and nipped any attempts in the bud, Takeda Kazuo said, "If so, then she is also in charge of the auction." Approaching the girl standing by the wall, the man slyly said to Yun-san, "I suggest we meet in person. You are curious about your father's whereabouts." Straightening his bow tie to avoid appearing so ominous, the manager added, "You can ask me absolutely anything, and of course I have a lot to tell you." Immediately after exerting sufficient pressure on the girl, the man raised his head and said, "So, what have you decided?" In response to the man's question, the girl said confusedly. At the same time, Takeda Kazuo rubbed his hands together, thinking she would agree. How could anyone in their right mind refuse such an offer? The next moment, the girl confidently said no, despite all his convincing. After the refusal, the live viewers started writing to the manager, and he became pixelated. Confused after the refusal and speechless for a second, the manager came to his senses and exclaimed, "Wait a minute, what do you mean? You're giving up 5 billion because you need to meet in person, and it's 5 billion won at the current exchange rate." Hearing her husband's question, Yoon Sia confidently replied, "But my uncle is right. We need to be more careful in the current situation. And if my father can only be contacted under certain conditions, I don't want to know anything about him." Impressed by the man's answer, the girl looked at the shocked manager and added, "I'm a minor, and therefore I have to obey what my uncle tells me." Hearing the girl's refusal to accept the manager's offer, the rest of the guests breathed a sigh of relief. They said, "What a relief. I thought all the items would go to Japan, but we couldn't let our guard down, so I let her refuse to meet in person. However, we cannot know what Japan might do." After that, the room fell silent. Realizing his trick did not work, the foreign manager said, "If you are still against it, there is nothing we can do." Ignoring the comments of the live broadcast viewers, the man happily announced, "We still offer you a price of 5 billion won." The offer of a personal meeting was optional. It was my own whim. And when I heard this, Jihan mentally said, "What the hell was he trying to do to trick us?" After repeatedly announcing the price for the 3 lots, the man pulled an envelope from his inner pocket and said, "From the very beginning, I had orders to offer you 5 billion. Holding out a sealed envelope named Ito Ryuhei, Takeda Kazuo spoke from the Sword King. The foreign manager handed the envelope to the confused girl, who did not expect this turn of events, saying, "This letter is for you, Yun-san." Continuing to hold the letter in his hands, the appointed Sia Takeda asked Kazuo what we had agreed upon, and then accepted the letter. Having completed the purchase of all the lots for 1 bid, the man happily said how easy it was to get the items of the Sword King. Did the Korean battle not have 5 billion won? After hearing these words from the manager, the rest of the guests mentally said, "What a bastard." As he approached Songji, the self-defense force manager said, "Ara ara." The auction quickly ended at the same time. Jihan thought the recruitment manager of the Japanese self-defense force. He was suspiciously good at hiring foreign players, and that's why he was nicknamed the Japanese misfortune after a successful deal. Rubbing his hands together, Takeda Kazuo said to Son-san, "Let's sign a contract now." Hearing the man's suggestion, Jihan thought he must be directly related to the player who uses unsurpassed beauty, and then answered well. The next moment, continuing his thoughts, the guy mentally said to him, "You need to beware. The atmosphere here is not very Japanese, and it's too easy to get all the items. As if we had agreed on everything in advance, it would look bad on the screen." The next moment, one of the guests said 5 billion from the beginning was nonsense, and asked why we came at all. At the same time, the girl felt the discontent of the guests in the hall and mentally said, "Everything is fine, you just need to turn the tide," and then she spoke into the microphone. Drawing the audience's attention, which was beginning to express discontent, Yoon added, "I heard that you decided to give away the Sword Palace. I don't know why, but it's a shame." Continuing to read out what was in the letter, the girl added, "This is the last thing you have left of me, so use the property wisely and more. This is the end of our father-daughter relationship." When this was said, everyone present was already riveted by the girl who began to dictate the message into the microphone. While all the guests did not understand what was happening, the girl added, reading from the letter, "Don't expect anything more from me." After reading the letter, Yoon Sia smiled awkwardly and said it was his handwriting. Having witnessed what was written in Ji-san's letter, I thought to myself, a woman of incomparable beauty, as far as I know, can influence the mind, so I am sure it is true. The next moment, remembering Yoon Se-jin, who had abandoned his niece, the boy added, "I hated him from the beginning, but he was a good and reliable father to Sia." As he continued to think about what he had heard, he felt he could not have done this to her, and at that moment, a loud sound of tearing paper rang through the hall. Tearing up the letter from her now ex-father, the girl tried to hide her emotions and said, "Takeda, tell Mr. Ito the following from me. I have read your last will and testament, and I'm glad to end our relationship with you." Sensing the situation's awkwardness, Sungji loosened his tie and turned his head away. The manager froze in place in surprise. After tearing the fox into small pieces and throwing it on the floor, the girl said in a dejected tone, "Oh, I shouldn't have torn the letter. Now the janitor will have to work even harder." As soon as she said this, she felt the sudden heat from the scorching torn leaves and heard Ji-han's voice confidently saying, "Don't worry, everything is fine." Using his power and skill to destroy the garbage scattered around the stage, the guy said he would support his ward. "I'll take care of it." After reaching the desired condition of the audience, Songji clenched his hand into a fist, and all the papers were also collected in the air. Then he spoke fire. After seeing an impressive fire show that could not have been predicted or planned, one of the guests exclaimed in confusion, "He was a magician, where he got his fighting techniques, mana, and divine power." The next moment, after recovering from the shock of what he had seen, Takeda Kazuo excitedly tightened his tie and said in his head, "I need a man like you. Japan needs a man like you." At the same time, all those present ran up to the guy, shouting and pointing out Sung Ji-han's business cards. "You're not yet a member of the guild. We'll accept you on any terms. I'm the first to come up. Talk to me first." Continuing to hand out their business cards, the people who wanted to talk to him cornered him and exclaimed, "Let's discuss it." To which he replied, "Wait, I'm a little embarrassed that you're all gathered around me." As he continued to slowly walk back from the crowd of people trying to recruit him, Ji-san added, confused, "This is not the time to talk about this," and then heard Yoon Sia say to her uncle. Continuing to push the guy, even when asked to calm down, the guests exclaimed for only a minute. Then looking back, Ji-san said, "I'm sorry, you can go without me. I'll catch up with you as soon as I get everything sorted out." After being allowed to return alone, the girl began to breathe heavily and paused, saying, "No, that's not the point." The girl crouched and spoke to me, putting one of her left hands to her head to demonstrate the problem. Continuing to show that something was wrong with her, Yoon Sia added that it would hurt a lot and instantly fell to the ground. Seeing what happened publicly, Ji-han rushed over, intensely fearing loss. He immediately rushed to his niece, picking her up and shouting, "Sia, open your eyes, Yoon Sia." Opening her eyes and looking at the man holding her in his arms, the girl said to her uncle heavily, after which he added, "Everything is fine. I'll take you to the hospital." Then, grabbing the guy by the jacket and pulling him to her, the girl whispered in his ear, "I pretend to hear what really happened." Ji-han was stunned into a stupor of surprise, but he was relieved. Smiling happily and giggling quietly, the girl said mentally, "I thought it would be pretty tricky for you to cope with all of them, so I played along." At the same time, while Ji-san was dealing with the problem, the security guards took the guests away so they wouldn't get stuck. They said disappointedly, "Oh, at this time, we won't be able to make a bet. That's a shame." Continuing to look at his actress who had decided to save her uncle from the onrushing crowd in this way, Ji-han saw her smile and then thought, "I did it." Breathing out a sigh of relief after such a stressful situation, the boy realized that she was pretending and thought, "God, how much they look alike." Immediately after this incident, Sung-ji looked around at the guests and said, "I'm sorry, but the auction is over now. My niece has become ill and needs to rest." The next moment, holding the girl's hand, the boy pulled her to her feet and said, "Seiya, can you go?" She replied, "Yes, I want to go home and rest as soon as possible." Walking off the stage and back to his house, after the auction ended abruptly, he heard Takeda Kazuo exclaim, "Excuse me, Sung-san, can I have a moment to apologize for my visit causing you inconvenience?" He pointed to his business card and added, "I would like to invite you and congratulate you officially, or you can contact me later." Hearing the impudent guest's request, Ji-san used his skill to tear the business card to pieces and said it was just funny. Then, seeing what had just happened, the foreign manager exclaimed in confusion. In response to Takeda's surprise, Kazuo Ji-han said sternly, "You can consider this my answer to you." After seeing what had just happened right before his eyes, one stream viewer wrote that the bronze player had rejected the manager's offer to recruit the fourth best guild in the world. He must be tearing up with rage right now. However, in spite of everything, the manager himself was not upset at all. His body was shaking with excitement, and then he said, "You are the best, Sung Ji-han. His power is real." Continuing to look at the remains of the business card that Takeda Kazuo had destroyed instantly, he thought that the unknown force that could tear a business card to shreds was real. Imagining what a great future awaits this guy, the manager added that he deserves it already now. Although he will be only in the Bronze League in the future, this Eastern Star will become great. Continuing his wet dreams, the foreign recruiting representative of the Japanese Self-Defense Forces said with a sly smile, "I must get it at any cost." At the same time, after leaving the main hall and finding herself in a place where there were no outsiders, the girl high-fived her uncle and said something extraordinary. Then, wiping the sweat from his face, Ji-san said happily, "You're a great actress, even I believe you." She confidently replied, "I'm actually good at anything," and then he added, "Even cooking." After not receiving an answer to his last question, Sung-ji received a system notification that said, "You have one unread message." After viewing the content with the donation, the guy surprisingly said 10,000 points of equipment. I turned off the broadcast, and he still threw the donation, to which Sia nervously added, "Wow, what a nasty style of letter." Then Sungji added, "I did not expect that my first sponsor would be some weirdo who could block him." The next moment, a woman's voice suddenly interrupted their joyful conversations by saying hello to Song Ji-han Yoon Sia. The woman caught a couple of young people on their way back home by surprise and added that she was glad to meet you. Stunning the auction organizers with her sudden appearance, she added, "I would like to greet you on behalf of the Divergent Guild. I am Lee Hae-young, head of the 3rd Department." Continuing to push the guy, the woman added, smiling happily, "I really wanted to meet you, and I'm sorry for this unexpected visit." When she finally finished her introductory speech, Ji-han was surprised to hear that you didn't have an invitation. "How did you get in here?" Then he thought she sounded familiar. "We've met before." In response to the guy's question about the possibility of getting in, the girl replied that I had pretty good connections with the Korean Battlestar Department, which I used. Continuing her speech, the girl added at work, "Everyone knows me as a nepotistic child." Hearing the remark from the woman, Ji-han said in confusion what then thought this confidence, shamelessness, and tone of voice. "They are familiar to me." While Ji-san was shocked at what he saw, the woman held out her hand and spoke before we got to the main question. Predictor of victories. Sun opened his system window to find out some information, noticed the pose he was taking, and mentally said stop. The next moment, Lee Hae-young confidently said, "I want to confess that I have been your fan for quite some time." Finally realizing who Ji-han was, he confusedly said it was her. At the same time, looking at the embarrassment of his staring uncle and the unfamiliar woman, Sia thought about what was wrong with him. He was impressed. The next moment, she turned her gaze to the woman standing before them, and she was frightened to think that he had fallen in love with her. After the guy had collected his thoughts after the sudden meeting, he said that everything has a dangerous line to cross because you can't return once you step on it. Surprising the guests with his phrase, the boy confidently added a quote from the famous writer Dostoevsky, known for his addiction to games. Well, what if she heard what Lim Ga-yoon's boyfriend just asked her and held back her anger so she wouldn't lash out at him right then and there? But it didn't last long because a girl bodyguard stepped forward in 1 second and said, "Step back, ma'am." Shielding her client from Ji-han, who had just revealed one of her most revelatory secrets, Lim Ga-yoon exclaimed, "How do you know her diva?" Only a few people know that she's a confirmed gambler. And hearing her subject's words, Lee Ha-young said in confusion, after which Ga-young added angrily, "How could an outsider know that?" Hearing the tone of the bodyguard's girlfriend and the woman's reaction, Ji-han smiled slyly and said, "Now I have no doubt." Recalling his past life, the boy confidently said in his head the nickname of this woman, Zero. She is the manager of the American Leaders Guild. She was the only Korean woman there besides me, and she was always either drinking or gambling or both. However, her life was set in this way because of her voice. Thanks to her voice, she became a deputy of the American Players Guild. In general, voice ability is used to strengthen after training. When people start paying attention to pumping other aspects, such as characteristics and gift ranks, it will be revealed in its entirety. Again recalling the image of the woman who had been the guild's deputy, he mentally added that Zero was the strongest of those who used the voice. The next moment, the bodyguard girl exclaimed in surprise, "Miss, maybe you go to the casino too," Ga-yoon replied, holding back her anger. "Please stop." After meeting the two prominent persons, Song-ji said the Plum Blossom Sword and Zero in the Divergent Guild are doing well. After which he said he met her on one of my past broadcasts. What she wrote in the chat stuck in my memory, so I clarified, "I'm sorry for taking you by surprise." The next moment, the bodyguard approached his lady and asked her in surprise, "So you're also writing in the chat room?" She nervously replied, "Please shut up." Immediately after this incident, deciding to change the tone of the conversation to a more relaxed setting, Lee Ha-young told the chem a little uncomfortable that I was called a gambler. Hearing the woman's words, Ji-han smiled and thought, "They called me a name, but it's a fact." At the same time, he looked at his Uncle Seo nervously and thought, "He's smiling. He must really like her." Feeling that everything was going smoothly, the woman reached for her purse and said, "Well, I don't mind talking in a more relaxed atmosphere. I have a feeling that we will see each other often in the future." Watching from a third party, Yoon Sia saw Ji-han's phone being held out to her and thought, "Oh my God, she wants to get the phone. She likes Uncle too." Offering him to enter her number into her phone, Lee Ha-young confidently said, "You're the right guild for the Divergent. Let's meet in person sometime." Unable to contain her joy, the niece grabbed her cheeks and thought, "Oh my God, I'm going to be an aunt soon." At the same time, fixing her hair, Lee Ha-young confidently said, "I was incredible. I'm great at setting the tone for a conversation while separating business and personal relationships." The next moment, looking back at her subject, the woman mentally said, "This is how you should turn men." But Lim Ga-yoon did not understand anything and looked at her like a dead fish. Throwing her hair back again to make herself look more elegant, Lee Ha-young confidently said in her head, "Here's to gaining experience." In response to the girl's proposal, embarrassed Sung-ji said, "I'm sorry, but I still don't know my phone number." Immediately after, throwing his arm around her neck, the guy said, looking at his niece Xia, "What's your number?" The girl was surprised to think, what kind of stupid excuses are these? Looking at her uncle with eyes full of wonder, Yun Xia added in her mind that he was pretending to be unattainable. Immediately after misinterpreting her uncle's words, the girl mentally added that he was definitely up to something and needed help. Then, leaning on Jihan Xia, she said, "Uncle, I'm not feeling well again." Seeing that she started to pretend to be sick again, the guy thought she really wanted to go home, so he had to see her off. Then he told my niece it was not good for me to go. Before saying goodbye to the representatives of the Divergent Guild, Sung-ji said, "If you give me your business card, I'll contact you." Lee Ha-young said, "Okay," holding out a piece of paper. Walking home with his niece, who was glowing and smelling beautiful, Jihan did not understand the reason for her behavior. Still, at that time, Xia said to himself, "You don't have to worry about your uncle's relationship." When the pair of young people had moved far enough away, Lee Ha-young said to Ga-young, to which she replied, barely containing her emotions, "Yes, ma'am." Then the woman, barely containing her anger, said, "You can laugh. I'm going to go crazy anyway, so you don't have to hold back." Hearing her subject's laughter mixed with apologies after the incident, Lee Ha-young said irritably. Riding the elevator to the top floor of her apartment, Yoon Xia suddenly said, "You know what was the biggest surprise for me?" Then, smiling happily, the girl said, "I didn't expect you to wear your father's suit," he replied. "I can't help it. I've grown more prominent, and mine doesn't fit me anymore." The next moment, Jihan began to adjust his suit due to the awkwardness of the situation and said the suit was his fault, to which Xia nervously replied, "If it suits you, it's fine." Immediately after the praise, the girl said, without mentioning what she was talking about, "By the way, your answer was terrible." Not knowing what she was talking about, Sung-ji looked at the girl and asked her what she was talking about in a surprised manner, which was too old-fashioned and tasteless. Imagining in my head a rough picture of what it looked like in her eyes, Xia added the tactic of being the first to refuse you, which has existed since prehistoric times. Looking at his niece, who was scolding him for something he didn't even know he was doing, the boy wondered what she was talking about. The next moment, raising a finger, my niece said, "You can act like you're unattainable, but it's just awful to say you forgot the number." It would be fortunate that I was there and could save the situation. Realizing what Jihan was talking about, he said confusedly, "I hadn't planned anything like that." When the girl heard her uncle's answer, she was surprised to hear him say that he had indeed said yes and nodded his head. Continuing to talk in a confused tone, the girl surprised you and asked if you were going crazy, to which Jihan confidently said no. Sometime after this event, having moved to the task, the boy received a system notification. "Welcome to the Bronze League on the territory of Canada. You are tasked with protecting the crystal and surviving the zombie attack." Once on the tower, where he had to destroy the crowd of zombies heading towards him and protect the crystal, the boy sighed heavily and said, "I'm so tired." Looking down at his head, waiting for the rest of his comrades with whom he was to carry out the mission, Sung-ji thought about how difficult it was to calm Xia. Immersed in his memories, he recalled when the girl began to cry. He exclaimed, "I ruined your chance at a relationship because of me." Immediately after mentioning the situation, Jihan put his hand behind his head and sighed heavily, saying to her, "I thought I liked Lee Ha-young, and who would ever like someone who likes gambling?" Continuing to reflect on what he had to face while calming his niece, the guy added, "I didn't expect to meet Zero like this, though." Starting to recall her past life where they watched sports broadcasts and Diego Macid won on TV, the girl exclaimed, "Damn, I lost again." Immediately after turning her gaze to the guy, Zero exclaimed irritably, "It was so stupid, how could he win?" Then Sung-ji thought, "We got close pretty quickly because we both lost our homeland and we used to bet on sports on weekends." Zero was simply addicted to it after these thoughts. Recalling the conversation further, the guy said, "I told you he would win." To which she replied, "How is that possible?" The next moment, when the man's status window was shown on the TV, the girl exclaimed that the god of football, SSS, had won an outdated gift, to which she heard me reply, "I told you to pay attention to the rank of the gift." Then she added that I would win next time. After hearing a promise from the persistent girl, Sungji said, "You'd better stop playing the O," and was told not to say that again. Taking a glass of alcohol in her hands, the girl bowed and said, "Everything has its own line, which is dangerous to cross because once you cross it, you can't go back, which annoys me." After hearing this, Jihan looked at his friend and asked if she wanted to get rid of the scar on her face. She replied that it was the price of making a deal with the devil. Once again, plunging into memories and thinking about these incidents, the guy said in his head, "We had a lot in common." As he continued enjoying his drink at the bar after winning the bet, he suddenly heard Zero say, "Hey, Jihan." Covering one of her eyes with her hand, the woman added, "Tell me why you have become stronger only now. If I had been as strong as I am now, I would have stayed in Korea." Looking down and smiling involuntarily, Zero added, "Then my friends wouldn't have died of guilt." Immediately after these words, the girl grabbed the glass and added, "Oh no, I just don't have the right to say that. I'm guilty of everything and hate myself." Clinking glasses of alcohol, a couple of people who found themselves in a foreign land continued to feel terrible emotions for their weakness, such as hatred and guilt for not being able to protect their loved ones. With his head down, the boy mentally prayed, yet it happened. The next moment, the guy finally gathered his thoughts. At that time, in the live chat, they were writing about what kind of suit he was wearing and where the sweatpants were. He probably came here straight from the auction to seduce me. Taking out the weapon he planned to use to clear this level from his inventory, the guy mentally said, "I wondered why it was so cheap despite its rank, but it turned out to be too heavy and oversized for most people." As he started swinging his weapon in different directions to test it, Sungji confidently told me it was not difficult to handle. While practicing with the sword, one of the players, who was surprised by the ease of his control of this weapon, requested that the status window be shown when he saw it. As he drove his sword into the tower, Sungji mentally said, "The audience is growing, and they are starting to ask questions. Thousands of people are already watching me." Looking through the window at the broadcast, he said thoughtfully, "I don't know if I should show it right now, but it would be foolish to ignore the requests of regular viewers." The next moment, when he opened the BattleTube achievements window and saw that he had completed only one of the 5 achievements, the boy slyly said in his head, wondering if he should answer right now. Immediately after devising a clever way to please the audience and benefit himself, the guy said, "Hello to everyone, this is Song Ji-han. Many people are interested in my status window, and I've received comments in response. Still, I wish we weren't interested, so don't provoke them." Seeing how active his audience became after being asked about the status window, Jihan confidently said, "I'll show it." Then I saw that life is beautiful, and then I could retire. The next moment, with a sly smile, the boy added, "But that will happen when I can get 200,000 subscribers on my channel. Then viewers will start writing, but you only have 10,000. The dead must rise again." Watching the audience's reaction after the condition was put forward, Jihan thought they were complaining because it would take a while to get 200,000, and then he said, "I'll add one more condition." After this statement, the comments quieted down, and the guy said, "If I lose at least one game, I will immediately show you my status window." Upon hearing the second condition, the audience suddenly became animated and received hope that they had not had. Still, Jihan was only too happy to do so, thinking how simple they were. 3 beams of light appeared right next to him the next moment, indicating that his allies had arrived to defend the tower from the zombie attack. When he saw who had come to see him this time, the guy said in confusion how they might have all gathered in one place. The guy's surprise was evident because his old friends were right before him. The first was the magician Kim Gyu-hyuk, the second was the Golden Ray, and the third was the football player. Also, upon arrival, when I saw my favorite Golden Ray in front of me, I joyfully exclaimed, "Who is it here? Sun Ji-han. We met again. It's definitely fate." At the same time, feeling a particular fear of the person he met in front of him at the test, the wizard frightenedly thought Sung Ji-han. The boy thought, looking at the wizard and wondering his name. Turning his gaze to the third participant the next moment, Sungji mentally said, "This is also the first time I've met him in person. Concentrating on the man kicking the ball on his leg, he mentally added Diego Masid. Watching him perform various soccer tricks, the boy mentally said, "He was the best player in Argentina before I came back in time." After these reflections, forgetting about the past where he lived and appreciating the strength of his comrade, Jihan added, "However, he is nothing now and looks vulnerable and ridiculous." The next moment, thinking about the composition of his team, the guy said in surprise, "Wait a minute, this seems a little strange." Looking around at a couple of his comrades whom he already knew and was aware of their classes, Jihan thought, "If I am a support player, I am a shiny warrior, and that is a mage." The next moment, he turned his gaze to the last member of his team and added in amazement that he was an archer, Diego Masid, the Argentine archer. Recalling the very moment Diego's status window was broadcast on TV after the competition, the boy thought confusedly that in his past life, he was a magician. At the same time, Kim Gyu-hyuk, standing nearby with a grudge against the team's support staff, gritted his teeth in anger and said, "I never thought I would meet this bastard." Tilting his head to the other side to calm down, the magician thought, "I lost my level because of him, and with my ability, I don't even want to see him." While he continued to mentally express his dissatisfaction, Hyuk received a system notification that said the Sword King's family had registered a reward for the task. When he saw it, the boy said in surprise, "What kind of fool could give me that?" Looking closely at the task description, which said to destroy the crystal, prevent Song Ji-han from taking first place, and reward 50,000 points of equipment, the wizard was shocked to think what kind of task it was. After a while, when the game started, Diego Masid began to act. If the zombies started to climb too high, the man simply knocked them down. The most interesting thing is that after hitting the enemy, the ball bounced back under the man's control, and he could continue without losing his ball. After destroying a few monsters approaching the tower, Diego told his Jihan, "Buff me, I'm an archer, and I need more power." Continuing to look at his friend, the man added that in a team game, you should treat all participants fairly. After which, Jihan looked at his hand and thought, "I didn't have enough characteristics until now, so I didn't use them much." Immediately after starting to cast the spell of amplification, the boy said, "However, now the number of divine powers has increased. You can try it." After which he said, "Power." As soon as the casting was completed, all the players felt an increase in their own strength characteristics. Still, the warrior and the wizard were most surprised. Feeling that he had become stronger thanks to his friend, the Golden Ray joyfully exclaimed, "Wait, Jihan, you gave us buffs. You're really a support player." At the same time, Kim Gyu-hyuk was thinking about why he was reinforcing us, and then he heard the magician we had already met. Looking at Sung-jin, he heard you would play with us this time, to which he nervously replied, "I'm sorry." Realizing what the boy meant, he immediately added, "Yes, of course I will." Hearing the strange conversation between his comrades, the Golden Ray approached Kim Gyu-hyuk and asked what the matter was between you, to which he replied that he would have thrown me out again if I had refused to obey. After receiving the necessary information from his comrades, Ji-ha jumped from the tower and exclaimed, "Well, I'm counting on you." Seeing what the support team had just done, Diego Masid asked Diego Masid, pointing out the crazy man's answer and what was not immediately apparent to the stupid footballer. After answering the archer's question, Kim Gyu-hyuk bared his teeth and thought, "I hate him. He thinks I'm his subject." Immediately after turning his gaze to the task window with the 50,000 reward, the guy added, "No, I'll do what I decide." At the same time, while going down to the crowd of enemies waiting for him, Jihan spoke fire. After creating a simple spell, the boy began to gain concentration. He mentally recited mana and divine power, which became more powerful after merging to tear apart the miserable crowd of zombies. By mixing divine power with mana, Jihan achieved the result of a sphere of blue flame in his hand. The next moment, he used this attack right on landing to clear his landing pad. All those within the radius of the attack were instantly burned, and those a little further away flew back. After clearing the landing site, the guy took out his sword, and with it he found himself on the ground, making a single shockwave upon contact with the ground. At the same time, while watching the Battle of Song Jihan, Diego Masid was amazed to hear a crazy Korean support say, to which the Golden Ray replied, "Oh my God, you're all watching." Focusing all the attention of his broadcast on Song Jihan, the Golden Ray joyfully said that all this was happening live. Having destroyed many enemies, Sungji noticed a big, bloody zombie approaching him. Not feeling any fear of the enemy, he bowed his head down a little and said, "I thought so." Activating his skill that he had changed to master along with Jihan's power, he thought, "No wonder I had to endure that abuse. This is the true value of the ability to control space." Having formed a dome with a radius of several meters around him, which also accommodated 2 more enemies, the boy mentally said absolute territory. Watching the monsters lose their ability to move, Jihan mentally said, "Anyone who enters this territory will be under the control of the one who uses it." Many people don't even realize this skill exists, but Jihan knows it well. He got all this knowledge thanks to Baron, who was bad at control rather than ability, so he often used him as a training partner. And because in the past, Sung Ji-sang had to take part in battles against his guildmaster when he used his power, Jihan was able to master it quite well and learn all its elements. Now Jihan is in his absolute state, using divine and martial power along with mana. Raising his enchanted sword, the boy spoke fire. With such skills, the boy quickly destroyed all enemies, and the miserable Bronze League level was not an obstacle. After he jumped down, the guy finished off another monster and received a system notification saying the number of enemies destroyed was 124 out of 1,000. Continuing to actively organize the genocide of monsters, the guy swung his sword and said in his head, "Last time, I couldn't kill 1,000, but now I'll definitely be able to." Moving quickly across the battlefield, destroying all the enemies along the way, the guy said, "There's still a little bit left." Jihan mentally spoke faster as he gained momentum in destroying enemies and making better paths through the crowd of zombies. At the same time, watching what was happening on the battlefield, the Golden Ray said in amazement, "Wow, this is just absurd." Then Diego Macid added, "I agree entirely with you." After some more time of wondering how the support player could destroy so many enemies alone, the Golden Ray spoke now. "I'm curious to see its characteristics." Seeing that the audience wrote, "What are the others doing? Golden Ray, show us Kim Gyu-hook." The warrior looked back and said, "Hey, they want to see you." At that very moment, the sorcerer was about to fulfill the task entrusted to him by creating a fireball. Noticing this, the Golden Ray exclaimed, "Hey, what are you doing?" At the exact moment, Kim Gyu-hyuk raised his head and took in a lungful air, angrily shouting, "Go to hell, Sun Jihan!" Continuing to express his dissatisfaction, the sorcerer added, "You bastard, you talentless bastard." These words reached the addressee himself, who was on the battlefield against the monsters. Continuing to slander his ally, who was downstairs and was not supposed to return, the magician added, "In recent days, everyone is looking at you alone, and you only adore your niece. So how did you manipulate her into believing your words? Or maybe it's not about that at all. You treat her well, but what did you do to make her obey you so meekly?" That was the last straw for Jihan's patience. When the veins of rage stood out on his face and he looked back with a murderous look, Kim Gyu-hyuk shouted from the tower, "What kind of relationship do you have there?" Currently, the reward has been increased by another 5,000 equipment points. Hence, the reward of 55,000 equipment points for Kim Gyu-hyuk reflects the degree of hatred the Sword King's family has for Song Jihan. When converted into money, these points amount to 55 million won, enough for Kim Gyu-hyuk to regain his courage as he cast a fireball and shouted, "You talentless rascal!" Being among a crowd of monsters to fulfill a secret task of exterminating monsters, Song Jihan understood perfectly what was happening.